The digital world of dating is a jungle of surprises, but I never thought my journey through it would feel like an episode of Black Mirror. It started as a casual chat with a guy who seemed ordinary enough, until the conversation swerved into the bizarre. It was a quiet evening when his message popped up. He seemed polite, engaging in casual small talk. "Hi there, how's your evening going?" he asked. Not bad, just relaxing after a long day. You?" I replied. "Same here. Work was brutal, but now I'm just chilling. So, what do you usually do to unwind?" We exchanged a few more messages, nothing too deep, just enough to keep the flow pleasant. As the evening grew later, I thought this was just another routine chat, until he dropped a proposition out of nowhere. "Want to come over and hang out?" The phrase "hang out" hung in the air, drenched in euphemism. I blinked, staring at the screen, my mind racing. It was late, we barely knew each other, and his invitation came with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable meeting up with someone I just started talking to, especially this late," I typed back. I thought the rejection would end things there, but I was wrong. His response shifted, his politeness dissolving into hostility. "Wow, you're such a prude," he shot back. I've heard it all before. Women with boundaries are often labeled uptight. I tried to keep the conversation civil. "I think it's just about different expectations. I'm sure you'll find someone who's on the same page as you," I replied. But he wasn't in the mood for maturity. Instead, he launched into a bizarre monologue that left me both shocked and amused. "You know, I've slept with 75 women this year alone, and let me tell you, they were all horrible." First, I couldn't help but laugh internally. 75? That's impressive. Maybe the problem isn't them, though. Ever considered that? I teased. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. "I'm just saying, none of them know what they're doing. I'm always left disappointed." I couldn't resist treating his absurdity with humor. "If you hate all these women, maybe you should consider changing your approach, or your personality," I joked. It was a light jab, but instead of diffusing the situation, it enraged him further. He doubled down, spewing insults and crass remarks like he was auditioning for the role of an unhinged antagonist. Just as I was about to end the conversation, he took an unexpected turn. "You know what? I think I love you," he declared. Love? We had barely exchanged a dozen messages, and he had spent most of the conversation insulting me. His sudden confession wasn't endearing. It was chilling. "I'm sorry, but I don't think this is going to work. And honestly, if you're this critical during chats, I'd hate to hear your feedback after anything else." Yet, he persisted, asking again if I would sleep with him. "Come on, are you sure? Just give me a chance," he pleaded. At that point, I had enough. "Yes, I'm sure, and just a tip, insulting someone isn't exactly a turn-on," I said firmly. I expected him to rage quit the conversation, but instead, he doubled down again, insisting I reconsider. "Are you sure?" Yes, I was sure, more sure than I had ever been about anything. I blocked him, deleted the app, and sat on my couch, replaying the bizarre exchange in my mind. It felt surreal, like a parody of modern dating. When I shared the story with friends, their reactions ranged from disbelief to hysterical laughter. "You should have asked if he kept a spreadsheet of his conquests," one quipped. "Or, if you were lucky number 76, another chimed in. Looking back, the absurdity is almost funny, but at the time, it was exhausting. Dating is hard enough without having to fend off emotional roller coasters disguised as people. Yet, this experience reinforced a vital truth. Boundaries are essential, and saying no is an act of self-respect. If nothing else, the ordeal gave me a renewed appreciation for trusting my instincts. And a fresh reminder, No one deserves to justify their standards to someone who clearly has none of their own. Sydney, Australia, a city renowned for its stunning harbor and vibrant nightlife, where the buzz of the evening conceals the darker undercurrents of life. On one seemingly ordinary night, a dinner date at a popular Korean barbecue restaurant would unravel into a night of terror for 39-year-old Sarah Romero, a nurse looking for a fresh start after a difficult divorce. Little did she know, the horrors of her past would resurface in a way she could never have imagined. As the sound of sizzling meat and the murmur of conversations filled the air, Sarah sat across from a man who had brought hope back into her life. She was ready to embrace happiness again, to move beyond the shadows of her previous marriage. But as the evening unfolded, the sense of safety she had rebuilt was about to be torn apart by a figure from her past. One who would stop at nothing to reclaim what he believed was his. Sarah Romero was a woman who had endured more than her share of hardship. Born and raised in the Philippines, she grew up in a culture where strength and resilience were essential traits. Determined to carve out a better life for herself and her children, she moved to New Zealand to train as a nurse. It was during this period that she met Anthony Villacruz, a fellow trainee who shared her drive and ambition. Their connection was swift and intense, leading to marriage and a move to Sydney, Australia, in search of greater opportunities. However, the relationship that began with such promise soon deteriorated. Behind closed doors, Anthony revealed a darker, more controlling side. His love turned to obsession, his care into coercion. He isolated Sarah from her friends, monitored her every move, and lashed out whenever he felt his authority was being questioned. The man who had once been her partner became her jailer, turning their home into a prison. Despite the growing darkness in her marriage, Sarah remained focused on her career and her children. She had 3 children from a previous relationship and 1 son with Anthony. Her children were the light in her life, giving her the strength to endure the increasing abuse. But as the years wore on, the situation became untenable. In 2016, after years of suffering, Sarah found the courage to leave Anthony. She filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order against him, hoping to put the nightmare behind her and start anew. Sarah's journey to recovery was slow and fraught with challenges. The scars of her past were deep, but she was determined to rebuild her life. She found solace in her work, her children, and the support of her friends. On social media, she shared glimpses of her new life, posting a smiling photo with the caption, "New Year, New Beginnings." It was a declaration of independence, a signal that she was moving forward. But beneath the surface, she knew that Anthony was not a man who easily let go. By March 2016, Sarah felt she was finally turning a corner. The divorce was finalized, her children were thriving, and she was beginning to entertain the idea of dating again. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, she signed up for Tinder, the popular dating app. The idea of meeting someone new was both thrilling and terrifying, but Sarah knew she had to try. Soon, Sarah matched with James Collins, a 53-year-old businessman who was also looking to start over. Their conversations were easy and lighthearted, filled with the kind of playful banter Sarah had long forgotten existed. James was kind, understanding, and attentive, qualities that Sarah found deeply reassuring after years of living under Anthony's oppressive control. When James suggested they meet for dinner, Sarah felt a flutter of hope. This could be the beginning of something good, something that might help her finally close the door on her painful past. They arranged to meet on March 30th at a popular Korean barbecue restaurant in the heart of Sydney. The restaurant was alive with activity. The smell of grilling meat filled the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Sarah felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of normalcy that had been absent from her life for far too long. She allowed herself to relax, to imagine a future where she could be happy and free from fear. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself opening up to James in ways she hadn't anticipated. She shared stories about her children, her work, and even touched on her past, though she avoided the darker details. James listened with genuine interest, offering supportive comments that made Sarah feel seen and heard. It was a feeling she had missed deeply, and in that moment she cherished it. But even as she began to let her guard down, a part of Sarah remained vigilant, her instincts honed by years of living with an unpredictable and violent man. She knew that peace could be fragile, that it could be shattered in an instant, and as the night drew to a close, her worst fears materialized. As the waiter cleared away their plates, Sarah felt a shadow fall across the table. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat, and there he was, Anthony, standing over them with an expression of cold fury. His presence was like a dark cloud, casting a pall over the once lively room. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted, the warmth and comfort replaced by a suffocating tension. "What are you doing with my wife?" Anthony's voice was low and dangerous, each word a dagger aimed at Sarah's heart. Sarah's mind raced as she struggled to find her voice. James, unaware of the full extent of the danger they were in, tried to respond calmly, explaining that they were just having dinner. But Anthony wasn't interested in explanations. His gaze remained locked on Sarah, and she knew this wasn't about dinner. This was about control, about punishment. Anthony had come to reclaim what he believed was his, and nothing would stand in his way. In an instant, the situation spiraled out of control. Anthony's hand shot out, grabbing James by the neck with a grip fueled by years of suppressed rage. The restaurant, once filled with the sounds of cheerful diners, fell into a stunned silence as Anthony pulled a hunting knife from his jacket. The blade, sharp and gleaming, caught the light as it arced through the air. Time seemed to slow as Sarah watched in horror, her mind struggling to process what was happening. The knife plunged into James's abdomen with brutal force, the impact sending shockwaves through the room. The silence shattered as diners screamed, chairs clattered to the floor, and Sarah's desperate pleas for Anthony to stop were drowned out by the chaos. But Anthony was beyond reason, beyond mercy. He had come with a singular purpose: to reclaim what he believed was his and to punish anyone who stood in his way. James's eyes widened in shock as the knife pierced his flesh, his hands instinctively reaching for the wound as blood began to seep through his fingers. Anthony pulled the knife out and stabbed again, each thrust more vicious than the last. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her body frozen in terror as she watched the man she had once loved transform into a monster before her eyes. But Anthony wasn't finished. His rage, once hidden behind a facade of charm, was now fully unleashed. After stabbing James multiple times, he turned his attention to Sarah. She tried to back away, to put distance between them, but there was nowhere to go. The restaurant that had once felt so warm and inviting now seemed like a prison, trapping her with a predator who knew no bounds. With a speed that belied his size, Anthony closed the distance between them. Sarah's mind raced as she raised her arm in a desperate attempt to protect herself. The knife slashed through the air, cutting into her flesh with a searing pain that stole her breath away. The first blow landed on her chest, the second on her arm as she tried to shield herself from the onslaught. Sarah crumpled to the floor, her body trembling as she fought to stay conscious. Blood pooled around her, the metallic scent filling her nostrils as she struggled to keep her eyes open. She could see James lying nearby, his body still, his chest barely rising and falling as he clung to life. And then, through the haze of pain and fear, she saw Anthony approach him again. With cold, methodical precision, Anthony straddled James's body and began stabbing him once more. Each thrust of the knife was filled with a fury that had been building for years, a fury that knew no limits. The man Sarah had once trusted, who had vowed to protect her, had become her worst nightmare. A nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. As James's body went limp, his final breath escaping in a shudder, Anthony finally stood up, his rage seemingly spent. The restaurant was in chaos. Diners were either frozen in place or scrambling for the exits, their faces pale with fear. But Sarah couldn't move. Every fiber of her being was focused on survival, on finding a way to escape the horror that had consumed her life. With the strength she didn't know she had, Sarah managed to drag herself toward the door, her vision blurred, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But she knew she had to get away. As she reached the door, Sarah glanced back, expecting to see Anthony closing in on her, ready to finish what he had started. But what she saw instead made her pause. Anthony had stopped in his tracks, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. For a moment, it seemed as if he was wrestling with something deep inside, an internal struggle between his overwhelming rage and the remnants of the man he used to be. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the hesitation was gone. Anthony's expression hardened, and he turned away from Sarah, his attention once again drawn to James's motionless body. The restaurant was eerily silent now, the chaos of moments before giving way to a heavy, oppressive stillness. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next horrifying act to unfold. With deliberate, almost mechanical movements, Anthony knelt beside James and, with both hands gripping the knife, plunged it into his chest one final time. The sound of the blade meeting flesh was sickening, a dull thud that seemed to echo in the silence. And then, as if satisfied with his work, Anthony stood up, blood dripping from the knife, his expression cold and devoid of any human emotion. Sarah, still on the floor, could barely breathe. The pain in her chest and arm was overwhelming, but it was the terror that truly paralyzed her. She had seen what Anthony was capable of, and she knew that if he turned his attention back to her, she wouldn't survive. Desperately, she tried to summon the strength to move, to escape before it was too late. But just as Anthony began to turn back toward her, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. The police, alerted by the terrified restaurant staff and patrons, were closing in. Anthony froze, the sirens piercing through his fury, pulling him back to reality. He looked down at the knife in his hand, the blood on his clothes, and then at the lifeless body of James Collins. The realization of what he had done seemed to wash over him all at once, his expression shifting from anger to something closer to shock. For a moment, it looked as if Anthony might flee, but instead, he simply dropped the knife and sat down beside James's body, his head in his hands. The fight had gone out of him. The man who had come to the restaurant with murderous intent now seemed broken, as if the enormity of his actions had finally caught up with him. When the police burst into the restaurant, guns drawn, they found Anthony sitting quietly, waiting for them. He offered no resistance as they cuffed him, his eyes vacant, the rage that had driven him now extinguished. It was over. Resolution. Resolve, main conflict, hint at new mystery. Sarah was rushed to the hospital, her body battered but alive. She had survived the attack, but the physical and emotional scars would take much longer to heal. The man who had once sworn to love and protect her had nearly taken her life, driven by a twisted sense of ownership and control. As she lay in the hospital bed, the events of that night played over and over in her mind, each memory more horrifying than the last. The trial that followed was a formality. Anthony's guilt was never in question. He was charged with murder and attempted murder, and his defense team could do little more than argue for leniency. But the judge, horrified by the brutality of the crime, showed no mercy. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was handed down, the weight of justice pressing heavily on everyone present. For Sarah, the sentence brought some measure of closure, but it did little to ease the nightmares that plagued her. She returned home to her children, trying to rebuild her life once more. But the shadow of that night lingered, a constant reminder of the horror she had narrowly escaped. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Anthony's face, heard his voice, and felt the cold steel of the knife that had nearly ended her life. In the months that followed, Sarah threw herself into her work, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. She surrounded herself with friends and family, drawing strength from their support. But deep down, she knew that the trauma would never fully fade. It was a part of her now, a scar that would never completely heal. On the surface, Sarah's life slowly began to return to some semblance of normalcy. She smiled more, laughed with her children, and even began to enjoy the little things in life that she had once taken for granted. But there were moments, late at night when the house was quiet and the world outside was still, when the fear would creep back in. She would lie awake, her heart pounding, convinced that she could hear footsteps in the hallway or the creak of a door opening somewhere in the dark. She knew it was irrational. Anthony was locked away, and he would never be able to hurt her again. But the fear was there, a deep, primal terror that refused to let go. It was the fear of the unknown, of the possibility that one day, something or someone else would come into her life, bringing with it the same darkness that had nearly consumed her. As she stood on her front porch one evening, watching the sunset over the Sydney skyline, Sarah took a deep breath. The world was beautiful, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. But she knew that beauty could be deceiving. The danger could be lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. With a final glance at the fading light, Sarah turned and walked back into the house, closing the door behind her. She had survived one nightmare, but the scars it left would never fully heal, and as she moved forward, she knew that she would always carry with her the knowledge that darkness could fall at any moment, turning even the most ordinary of days into a living hell. Her story wasn't over. It never truly would be. She wanted to meet me alone, on the beach, no one else around. Definitely a good sign, I thought. Tinder was supposed to be a wonderland of discreet, anonymous fun that awaited me after an extremely painful divorce. Instead, it had turned into a battlefield of rejection, offering me more no's in an hour than I could tally after a year of social events and bar crawls. Then Tabby swiped right. I couldn't believe it at first. Cute, funny, employed, capable of driving herself, pretty much everything I was looking for in a Tinder match. I won't lie, I have the same needs as everyone else on the app. So, when Tabby wanted to meet me on the sand at Hollywood Beach near Ventura, alone, far from prying eyes, it felt like the perfect match. Of course, I thought it was too good to be true. I was mostly convinced that she wouldn't show. Following her cryptic instructions, I took a narrow path between two houses leading straight to the water. My phone's flashlight bobbed in front of me, but darkness quickly surrounded me. There's about 200 yards of sand between the houses and the water. I soon felt like I was lost in the middle of a desert. No house lights were on nearby. I was entirely alone. I was just about ready to turn around, and then I saw her. She was lying face up in the sand. "Tabby," I murmured. She didn't say anything, but I knew it had to be her. No one else was within screaming distance. I aimed my flashlight at her and walked straight forward to avoid surprising or scaring her. Strangely, she remained lying down until I was standing right beside her. Hi," I greeted, glancing down with a hesitant smile. She looked as good as her picture, better even, which shocked me. She wore a red dress, splayed out on the sand like she'd been ready for a night out. Tabby was gazing up at the stars with an unblinking stare. Slowly, she reached for me and beckoned with a wag of her finger. I sat in the cold sand next to her, setting my phone down to provide just enough light so we weren't completely blind. I hesitated for a moment before taking her hand in mine. She squeezed my fingers playfully, then ran her nails up my forearm, leaving a trail of goosebumps in her wake. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It had been so long since I'd felt truly connected to someone. I didn't know why she wanted silent touching, but I decided not to question her motives. I reached forward to stroke her cheek in the dim light. But her cheek was lukewarm. Tabby's head turned away from me as I grazed it, continuing to rotate unnaturally until it broke contact with my fingers. Then, with a sickening sound, like pulling a shoe from a puddle of syrup, her head twisted off her neck and rolled onto the sand. There was just enough light to see the squishy viscera of her ravaged stump. I froze. For a moment, all I could sense was the distant crashing of waves, the cold sand beneath me, and Tabby's severed head. Movie deaths are always profound and dramatic. I didn't know how to process the casual, everyday way a human body could break, like a cracking egg. Then I noticed her hand gripping my arm. I stared in horror as her fingers continued to creep upward despite her lack of a head. Her other arm reached forward to join it. Tabby's entire body began squirming toward me. The sand beneath her neck shifted, and everything made horrifying sense. Somebody was wearing Tabby's clothes. They'd cut off her head, laid down on the beach and buried their own head in the sand, positioning her severed head above their own. In daylight, I would have recognized it immediately, but the darkness had hidden just enough. They wrapped both hands around my elbow and sat up. A cascade of sand raining down from their obscured face, I saw dark eyes staring back at me before instinct took over. I grabbed a fistful of sand with my free hand and threw it at their face. With an unnatural hiss, the grip on my elbow loosened just slightly, and that was enough. I yanked my arm free, scrambled to my feet, and raced into the darkness. Panic blurred into mindless flight. I could have been running for 19 hours or 13 seconds. I truly don't know. My phone was still on the beach, its bright flashlight making it impossible to hide, so I didn't stop to retrieve it. Eventually, I found myself on a dark highway with no street lamps and no idea where to go. I felt ready to scream. Had the world disappeared? Where were all the motorists? Almost as if in answer, twin lights appeared far down the road. Relief surged through me as I sprinted toward them, my shoes slapping against the pavement. The car screeched to a halt just before hitting me. I must have terrified the driver, but I didn't care. I rushed to the passenger side window. It cracked open an inch. "Can I help you?" a timid voice asked. "Yes," I gasped, almost laughing with relief. "I was attacked on the beach and lost my phone. Could you call the police and help me find my car?" The kindness of strangers really is the best thing. I reflected on that as we drove down the highway, my tension finally easing. "Shit, I must look terrible," I muttered, glancing into the rearview mirror. Dark eyes stared back at me from the back seat. Bloodshot eyes, as though someone had just thrown sand in them. I spun around, convinced it was all in my head, but the seat wasn't empty. Someone wearing Tabby's red dress was lying there. I jumped out of the moving car just as a familiar hand reached for me. Yes, Hitting the pavement at 30 miles an hour hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt. But it didn't kill me, and that was all I needed to keep going. I hobbled back to my car and tore out of there as fast as I could, checking the back seat more than the road. My horror grew as I realized I'd been texting this psychopath the entire time. How much did they know about me? I don't know if I'm safe, but I had to let you know. It was my first foray into online dating. An impulsive decision made on a dull weekend while stationed on a military base. What could go wrong, I thought. Everything, as it turned out. My phone buzzed for the 10th time that night, the screen lighting up with his name. I hadn't even met him in person yet, and already the alarms in my head were blaring. I was in my early 20s, fresh-faced and stationed far from home. Life on base was monotonous, and I longed for a connection outside the confines of barracks gossip and routine drills. The barracks felt suffocating, with their identical gray walls and the ceaseless hum of fluorescent lights that seemed to drain all color from the world. So, with a mix of naivety and curiosity, I downloaded a dating app. My friends warned me, but I brushed them off. "Don't say we didn't warn you," my roommate said with a grin, watching me swipe through profiles. "I'll be fine," I replied. "It's just dinner, not a wedding." When I matched with a guy who seemed to share my interests, tattoos, nerd culture, and a love for Japanese food, I felt a spark of excitement. His messages had an easy charm, filled with playful banter that made me smile. His profile picture showed a lean figure with an endearing smirk, his tattoos peeking out from under a graphic tee. He was polite in his messages, funny even. Before I knew it, we'd exchanged numbers. Rookie, mistake number 1. Our first phone conversation was strange. His voice was raspy, almost labored, as though he'd just finished running a marathon. "Hi, is this Sarah?" he asked between heavy breaths. "Yes, this is Sarah," I replied, already unsure. "Are you okay? You sound out of breath." "Oh, yeah, allergies. It's spring, you know?" he answered quickly. I chalked it up to allergies and pushed the unease aside. "Don't judge," I reminded myself. Maybe he was nervous. He suggested dinner for our first date, and I agreed. Rookie mistake number 2. The night arrived, and so did he. My heart sank when I saw him. The man from the photos, the lean, tattooed nerd, was nowhere to be found. Instead, a significantly older, overweight version of him shuffled towards me, clutching a bouquet of slightly wilted flowers. His face, once sharp and confident in the photos, now looked worn and tired, with deep creases etched into his forehead. I plastered on a smile, my military discipline kicking in. "Hi, you must be Sarah," he said, his heavy breathing now even more pronounced. "Yes," I replied, forcing a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you." We went to a Japanese steakhouse, a noisy, bustling place where the chef's theatrics could distract from the growing pit in my stomach. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling meat and soy sauce, the clatter of knives against the grill punctuating the otherwise awkward atmosphere at our table. "You look, different from your photos," I ventured carefully, trying to be diplomatic. "Oh, those are a few years old," he said, brushing it off. "But it's still me." I focused on the flickering flames and the clinking of spatulas, trying to drown out his awkward attempts at conversation. Every so often, I caught him staring at me, his heavy breathing audible even over the din. The chef tossed a shrimp into his hat, eliciting cheers from the table, but my mind was elsewhere, calculating the quickest escape route. "So, do you come here often?" he asked, his voice breaking the brief silence. "Not really," I said quickly, pretending to be fascinated by the chef's antics. By the end of the meal, I was mentally drafting my polite rejection message, but when I hugged him goodbye, his grip lingered a second too long. That night, I sent him a text. "You're nice, but I don't think we're a match. Best of luck." What followed was a barrage of calls and messages. My phone buzzed incessantly, the notifications lighting up my darkened room like fireflies. "Why won't you give me another chance?" one text read. "You're making a big mistake," said another. My phone became a source of dread, lighting up at all hours with his name. When I blocked his number, new ones appeared. Fake profiles flooded my social media, each one leading to vicious messages. "You'll regret this," one message read. "No one else will want you anyway," said another. The harassment escalated. Then came the revelation. He was a contractor working on my base. Panic gripped me as I realized he had access to personal information. He weaponized it, accusing me of inappropriate behavior, even prostitution. The rumors reached my chain of command. I was summoned by my sergeant major who, thankfully, saw through the lies. "So, you thought a guy with breathing issues and decade-old photos was the one?" my sergeant major asked, barely stifling a laugh. "Not my proudest moment, sir," I admitted, my face burning with embarrassment. The harassment eventually stopped after an official complaint and intervention, but the damage was done. I deleted every dating app and vowed never to trust so easily again. To this day, I shudder when I hear heavy breathing over the phone or see a bouquet of flowers. The base's corridors now felt colder, the laughter of comrades distant and hollow. Sometimes, I still wonder, was I just unlucky, or was this a warning? The world of online dating hides many faces, and not all of them are harmless. For now, I'm content with my solitude, far from swipes and fake smiles. But I'll never forget the man who turned a casual date into a nightmare. I never thought I'd be the guy to write one of these posts, but here I am, fingers trembling as they hover over my keyboard. I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone out there can help me make sense of what the hell happened. But before I dive into the nightmare my life has become, let me introduce myself. My name's Jake, and I'm your average 28-year-old guy trying to make it in the big city. I work as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, spending my days hunched over a computer, tweaking layouts and debating the merits of serif versus sans serif fonts. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays the bills and leaves me enough free time to pursue my real passion, photography. I'm not what you'd call conventionally handsome. I've got this mop of unruly brown hair that never seems to behave, no matter how much product I use. My eyes are a muddy hazel, nothing special, hidden behind thick-rimmed glasses that I've been told make me look adorkable, whatever that means. I'm average height, with a bit of a dad bod from too many late nights snacking while working on projects. But I've got a decent smile, or so I've been told, and I can usually make people laugh. My apartment is a tiny studio in the heart of downtown. It's cramped, with barely enough room for my bed, desk, and the small kitchen area. The walls are plastered with my photographs. Moody black and white shots of the city at night, close-ups of raindrops on leaves, that sort of thing. It's not much, but it's home. My love life? Well, that's been a bit of a disaster. I've had a few relationships over the years, but nothing that really stuck. My last girlfriend, Sarah, dumped me 6 months ago because she said I was too absorbed in my work. Maybe she was right. I do tend to get lost in my projects, sometimes forgetting to eat or sleep when I'm in the zone. After Sarah left, I threw myself into my work even more. I picked up extra freelance gigs, stayed late at the office, anything to keep my mind off the loneliness that crept in during the quiet hours of the night. But eventually, even I had to admit that I needed to get back out there. That's when I decided to give Tinder a shot. I'd always been skeptical of dating apps, but a couple of my coworkers had good experiences with it, so I figured why not. I spent an embarrassingly long time choosing photos for my profile. Should I go with the serious, artsy black and white portrait, the goofy snapshot from my best friend's wedding? In the end, I settled on a mix, a couple of casual shots, one of me with my camera, and yes, the adorable one with the glasses. For the first few weeks, it was pretty uneventful. A few matches here and there, some conversations that fizzled out after a day or two. I was about ready to give up on the whole thing when I matched with her. Lily. Lily's profile was different. Most girls on Tinder have the usual pics, beach shots, gym selfies, that kind of thing. But Lily's pics were artsy as fuck. Black and white portraits where she was always looking slightly off camera, like she was distracted by something just out of frame. It was intriguing, I'll give her that. We matched on a Tuesday night and she messaged me first. "Hey there, handsome," she wrote, followed by a winky face. "Wid?" I was sitting at my desk, editing some photos from a recent shoot, when my phone buzzed with the notification. I picked it up, my heart doing a little flip when I saw her name. "Just chillin', editing some pics, boo," I replied. "Same. Bored AF though. Want to change that?" she asked, adding another winky face. Now, I'm not gonna lie, my first thought was, holy shit, I'm gonna get laid tonight. But I didn't want to come on too strong and scare her off. So, I played it cool. "Haha, maybe. What did you have in mind?" I asked. "You tell me," she teased. "I'm down for anything. How about we grab a drink first, get to know each other a bit?" "Sounds good. When and where?" she replied. We agreed to meet at this little dive bar downtown the next night. I was pumped, but also a bit nervous. I mean, she seemed almost too eager, you know. But I figured, what's the worst that could happen? The next day at work, I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to Lily's profile pics. Those haunting eyes that seemed to look right through me. My boss, Dave, had to snap his fingers in front of my face more than once to get my attention. "Earth to Jake," he said, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "You with us, buddy?" "Yeah, sorry," I mumbled, forcing my eyes back to my computer screen. "Just a little distracted today." Dave's expression softened. "Hot date tonight?" I felt my cheeks flush. "Maybe, we'll see." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Good for you, man. Just don't forget about the Johnson account deadline tomorrow, all right?" I nodded, promising myself I'd stay late to finish up if I had to. No way was I going to let this date mess up my work. The rest of the day crawled by. I must have changed my outfit 5 times before leaving my apartment, finally settling on a simple black button-down and my nicest jeans. As I locked my door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. My hair was doing that thing again, sticking up in all directions. I tried to smooth it down, gave up, and headed out. I got to the bar about 15 minutes early. It was a place called the Rusty Nail, a hole-in-the-wall joint with dim lighting and a jukebox that hadn't been updated since the 90s. I liked it because it was never too crowded, and they made a mean old-fashioned. As I nursed my first drink, I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Hey there, handsome," came a familiar voice. I turned around, and there she was, Lily. And let me tell you, her profile pics didn't do her justice. She had this long, dark hair that seemed to move even when she was standing still. And her eyes, man, her eyes were something else. Deep green, almost hypnotic. "Hi," I managed to stammer out. "Lily, right?" She smiled, and I swear the whole bar got a little brighter. "That's me. You must be Jake. Nice to finally meet you in person." We grabbed a table and started chatting. The conversation flowed easily, like we'd known each other for years. We talked about our jobs. She was a freelance photographer, which instantly piqued my interest. Our hobbies, we both loved horror movies. And our families, she was an only child like me. As the night went on, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. Not in a bad way, necessarily. It was more like when you're watching a movie and you can tell there's a jump scare coming. But you don't know exactly when. At one point, Lily excused herself to go to the bathroom. While she was gone, I checked my phone and saw a message from her. "Having a great time," the text read, followed by a winky face. "Can't wait to see where this goes." I looked up, confused. She'd left her phone on the table. How did she? Before I could think too much about it, she was back, sliding into the seat across from me with that same mesmerizing smile. "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Yeah, I thought I got a message from you, but your phone's right here." She laughed, a sound like tinkling bells. "Oh, that's weird. Must be a glitch or something." I nodded, pushing the thought out of my mind. We ordered another round of drinks, and as the night wore on, I found myself more and more drawn to her. There was something about Lily that was just captivating. Around midnight, the bar started to clear out. Lily leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear. "Want to get out of here?" My heart raced. This was it. But again, that nagging voice in the back of my head told me to take it slow. "How about we call it a night?" I suggested. "Maybe we could do dinner tomorrow." For a split second, I swear I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Disappointment, anger? But it was gone so fast I thought I must have imagined it. "Sure," she said, her smile never wavering. "Dinner sounds great." We said our goodbyes outside the bar. As I turned to leave, Lily grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Jake," she said, her voice low, "I had a really great time tonight. I can't wait to see you again." "Me too," I replied, trying to ignore the goosebumps that had suddenly appeared on my arm. As I walked home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into something I didn't fully understand. But I was excited, intrigued, and maybe a little scared. Little did I know that fear was about to become all too real. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a mouth that felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I groaned, reaching for my phone on the nightstand. The bright screen made me wince as I checked the time. 10:37 a.m. Shit. I was late for work. As I scrambled out of bed, my phone buzzed with a string of notifications. All from Lily. "Morning, handsome," one read, followed by a winky face. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Can't wait to see you again. Dinner tonight. Jake, you there? Hello? Why are you ignoring me?" I checked the timestamps. The first message was sent at 3:17 a.m., barely an hour after we'd said goodbye. The last one was from just a few minutes ago. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling in my gut. This was a lot. "Sorry, just woke up," I replied. "Late for work. Dinner sounds great. Where do you want to go?" Her reply came almost instantly. "My place. I'll cook," she added with a winky face. I hesitated. Going to her place on the second date? It seemed a bit fast, but then again, hadn't I been hoping for exactly this kind of opportunity? "Sure, sounds good." "What time?" 7. "I'll send you the address. Can't wait," she wrote. I quickly shot off a text to Dave, my boss, apologizing for being late and promising to stay extra to make up for it. Then I rushed through my morning routine, barely tasting the stale coffee I gulped down before heading out the door. The day at work was a blur. I couldn't focus on anything, my mind constantly drifting back to Lily. There was something about her that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was like she had this gravitational pull, drawing me in even when we weren't together. "Earth to Jake," Dave's voice cut through my thoughts. I looked up to see him standing over my desk, arms crossed. "You okay, buddy? You've been staring at that same layout for the past hour." I felt my face flush. "Yeah, sorry, just got a lot on my mind." Dave's expression softened. "That hot date go well last night?" "Yeah," I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "We're actually seeing each other again tonight." "Good for you," Dave grinned, clapping me on the shoulder. "Just try to keep your head in the game while you're here, all right?" I promised I would, but it was easier said than done. As the day wore on, my phone kept buzzing with messages from Lily. Random thoughts, jokes, even a few suggestive photos that made me glad I wasn't sitting in an open office. At 6:30, I headed out to Lily's place. She lived in an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that probably looked charming in daylight but took on a sinister air in the growing dusk. As I walked up the creaky steps to her front door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned around, scanning the street, but it was empty. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could touch the wood, the door swung open. Lily stood there, backlit by a warm glow from inside the house. She was wearing a flowing red dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. "Jake," she breathed, her green eyes seeming to glow in the dim light. "I'm so glad you're here." She pulled me inside, the door closing behind me with a soft thud that sounded strangely final. The interior of the house was not what I expected. While the outside looked like it hadn't been updated since the Victorian era, the inside was sleek and modern. Minimalist furniture, abstract art on the walls, and what looked like state-of-the-art tech scattered around. "Wow," I said, taking it all in. "Nice place." Lily smiled, leading me towards what I assumed was the kitchen. "Thanks. I like to keep people guessing." The smell of something delicious wafted through the air, making my stomach growl. "Whatever you're cooking smells amazing," I said. "Oh, that's just a little something I whipped up," Lily replied, a coy smile playing on her lips. "I hope you like it. Spicy." We sat down to eat, and I had to admit the food was incredible. Some kind of exotic dish I couldn't quite place, with flavors that danced on my tongue. As we ate, we talked and laughed, the wine flowing freely. I found myself relaxing, the unease from earlier melting away under Lily's warm gaze. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Lily put on some music, something low and thrumming that seemed to vibrate in my chest. As we sat on the couch, she moved closer, her hand resting on my thigh. "I'm really glad you came over tonight, Jake," she said, her voice low and husky. I swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of how close she was. "Me too," I managed to say. She leaned in, her lips brushing against mine. The kiss was electric, sending shockwaves through my body. I pulled her closer, losing myself in the moment. But then something strange happened. As we kissed, I felt different, lightheaded, but not in the usual way. The room seemed to spin, colors blurring and shifting. I pulled back, blinking hard. "Are you okay?" Lily asked, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, I shook my head, trying to clear it. "I feel a little weird." "Oh no," Lily said, her hand cool against my forehead. "Maybe you're coming down with something. Why don't you lie down for a bit?" I nodded, letting her guide me to what I assumed was a guest bedroom. The room swam in and out of focus as I collapsed onto the bed. Lily's face hovered above me, her green eyes seeming to glow in the darkness. "Just rest," she whispered, her voice sounding far away. "I'll take care of you." As I drifted off, I could have sworn I saw something shift in Lily's face, like a ripple passing over water. But before I could process what I'd seen, darkness claimed me. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, the room was pitch black. I blinked, trying to orient myself. Where was I? What happened? As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized something was off. The room felt different, smaller somehow, and there was a smell, musty and damp, like a basement that hadn't been aired out in years. I reached out, feeling for a lamp or a light switch, but my hand hit something solid. Wood, rough and splintery. I ran my hand along it, my heart beginning to race as I realized what it was. I was in a box, a fucking box. Panic surged through me. I pushed against the wood, but it didn't budge. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. And then I heard it, a soft scratching sound, coming from above me. It grew louder and more frantic. Whatever was up there, it was trying to get in. Or maybe it was trying to get out. I don't know how long I was trapped in that box. Minutes, hours. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the suffocating darkness. The scratching sound above me had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow even worse. Just as I was about to give in to full-blown panic, I heard a click. A sliver of light appeared, growing wider as the lid of the box was slowly lifted. I squinted against the sudden brightness, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. And there she was, Lily, peering down at me with those hypnotic green eyes. But something was different. Wrong. Her face seemed to shift and ripple, like I was looking at her through a heat haze. "Oh, good, you're awake," she said, her voice oddly distorted. "I was worried I might have given you too much." "What?" I croaked, my throat dry and scratchy. "What's going on? Why am I in a box?" Lily tilted her head, a gesture that should have been cute but now seemed alien and predatory. "Don't you like it? I made it just for you." She reached down, grabbing my arm with that surprisingly strong grip, and hauled me out of the box. As I stumbled to my feet, I realized we were in some kind of basement. The walls were bare concrete, covered in strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist when I wasn't looking directly at them. "What is this place?" I asked, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. "What did you do to me?" Lily's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked just a bit too sharp. "I didn't do anything to you, Jake. I'm just helping you see things as they really are." She gestured around the room, and I noticed for the first time that we weren't alone. Shadows moved in the corners, taking on vaguely humanoid shapes before melting back into darkness. And on the far wall, I felt the blood drain from my face. Dozens of Polaroid photos were tacked to the wall, each showing a different man. Some were smiling, obviously taken on dates. Others looked terrified, their eyes wide with fear. And some were just empty-eyed husks staring blankly at the camera. "Do you like my collection?" Lily asked, her voice filled with pride. "You'll be joining them soon." I backed away, my legs shaky. "What the fuck are you?" Lily laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally in the basement. "Oh, Jake, I'm whatever you want me to be. Isn't that what all men want? A girl who's down for anything?" As she spoke, her form began to change. One moment, she was the beautiful woman I'd met at the bar. The next, she was a writhing mass of shadows and teeth. I blinked hard, convinced I must be hallucinating, but the transformations continued. "This isn't real," I muttered, squeezing my eyes shut. "This can't be real." I felt a cold hand on my cheek, forcing me to open my eyes. Lily was inches from my face, her green eyes now swirling pools of darkness. "It's very real, Jake," she whispered, "and it's only just beginning." Suddenly, the room began to spin. The concrete walls melted away, replaced by swirling vortexes of color and shadow. I felt like I was falling, tumbling through space and time. When the world finally stopped moving, I found myself back in my apartment. I was lying on my bed, fully clothed, my alarm blaring next to me. With a shaking hand, I reached out and shut it off. 6:30 a.m., Tuesday morning, the day after I'd first matched with Lily on Tinder. Had it all been a dream? Some kind of stress-induced hallucination? I grabbed my phone, my heart racing as I opened Tinder. There she was, our match still at the top of my list. But our conversation, it was gone, as if we'd never spoken. Relief washed over me. It had just been a nightmare. A vivid, terrifying nightmare, but nothing more. I let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through my hair. That's when I noticed it. A small red mark on my wrist, right where Lily had grabbed me in the bar. In the dream. As I stared at the mark, my phone buzzed with a new message. From Lily. "Morning, handsome," it read, followed by a winky face. "Ready for round 2? I dropped the phone like it was on fire, scrambling out of bed. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. But as I moved, I felt something in my pocket. Frowning, I reached in and pulled out a Polaroid photo. My blood ran cold as I looked at it. It was me, sleeping in that box in the basement. And in the corner of the photo, just barely visible, was a pair of glowing green eyes. I sank to the floor, my back against the bed, and as the reality of the situation crashed over me. This wasn't over. It was far from over. And Lily, whatever she was coming for me again. My phone kept buzzing with messages, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Instead, I sat there, staring at the photo, trying to make sense of what was happening to me. That's when I heard it. A soft scratching sound coming from inside my closet. The same sound I'd heard in the box. Slowly, trembling, I turned my head towards the closet door, and as I watched, paralyzed with fear, the handle began to turn. Lily's form solidified slightly, taking on a more human appearance, though still wrong in ways I couldn't quite define. She tilted her head, that predatory smile back on her face. "I am whatever you desire most, Jake," she said, her voice a seductive purr. "Isn't that what Tinder is all about? Finding your perfect match?" She took a step towards me, and I pressed myself harder against the wall, wishing I could phase through it. But I don't. I never wanted this. Lily laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Oh, but you did. All those lonely nights, swiping endlessly, hoping for a connection. You were calling out to something, Jake, and I answered." As she spoke, the room around us began to change. The walls melted away, replaced by an endless void filled with swirling colors and shapes. I could see other figures in the distance, trapped in bubbles of reality. With a jolt, I realized they were the men from the Polaroids in the basement. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lily spread her arms wide, her form shifting and twisting. "This is my domain, Jake. A place between realities, where desires and nightmares become one." She leaned in close, her breath cold against my ear. "And now, you're a part of it." I felt something inside me snap. Maybe it was the fear, or the adrenaline, or just the sheer impossibility of the situation. But suddenly, I was angry, furious at being toyed with, at being trapped in this nightmare. "No," I growled, pushing her away with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm not playing your game anymore." Lily's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed dangerously. "You don't have a choice, Jake. You're mine now." She lunged at me, her form shifting into something monstrous, all teeth and claws. But this time I was ready. I ducked under her attack and ran. Not towards any specific destination, but simply away from her. The void around us churned and twisted, reality bending in impossible ways. I could hear Lily behind me, her inhuman shrieks echoing through the nothingness. But I kept running, my feet somehow finding purchase on nothing at all. As I ran, I saw flashes of my life, my apartment, the office, the rusty nail bar, but they were distorted, twisted versions of reality. In each scene I saw myself, but not quite right. Versions of me that had made different choices, taken different paths. And in each one, Lily was there, watching, waiting. I realized then what she truly was, not just a monster, but a parasite, feeding on the loneliness and desperation of people like me. She was the embodiment of every bad decision, every moment of weakness. But I wasn't weak, not anymore. I skidded to a stop, turning to face her. Lily was right behind me, her form a writhing mass of shadows and hate. "Enough," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "I'm done being your puppet." Lily snarled, lunging at me once more. But this time, as her claws reached for me, I stood my ground. I thought of my life, my friends, my family. All the real connections I had, not the false promise of a perfect match. "You have no power over me," I said, and I believed it. There was a sound like reality itself was tearing apart. Lily screamed, her form dissolving into motes of light. The void around us shattered like glass, and I was falling. I jolted awake with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in my bed. Light streamed through my window, and I could hear the familiar sounds of the city outside. For a long moment, I just sat there, my heart racing, trying to process what had happened. Had it all been a dream? Some kind of shared hallucination? I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking slightly. There was Tinder still installed. With a deep breath, I opened it. My match with Lily was gone. In fact, her profile had disappeared entirely, as if she had never existed. Relief washed over me, so intense I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. It was over. Whatever Lily was, whatever had happened, it was done. As I set my phone down, I noticed something on my wrist. The red mark where Lily had grabbed me was still there, but it was fading even as I watched. Soon, it would be gone, the last tangible proof of my nightmare. I got out of bed on shaky legs and made my way to the bathroom. As I splashed water on my face, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different, older somehow, like I'd lived a lifetime in the space of a night. But I also saw strength there, a resolve I hadn't had before. I picked up my phone again, my finger hovering over the Tinder icon. With a deep breath, I pressed down, holding it until the app began to wiggle. Then I hit the little X, watching as it disappeared from my screen. No more games, no more swiping. It was time to make real connections in the real world. As I got ready for work, I felt lighter somehow, free. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in some twisted corner of reality, Lily was still out there, waiting for the next lonely soul to swipe right. It's been 3 months since my encounter with Lily, and I still wake up some nights in a cold sweat, the echo of her laughter ringing in my ears. The rational part of my brain wants to dismiss it all as a vivid nightmare, a product of stress and loneliness. But I know better. The memory of those green eyes, shifting and swirling with otherworldly malice, is too real to be a mere figment of my imagination. I've tried to move on, to return to some semblance of normalcy. I threw myself into my work, churning out designs with a fervor that both impressed and worried my boss, Dave. He pulled me aside one day, concern etched on his face. "Jake, buddy," he said, his hand on my shoulder. "You've been putting in a lot of hours lately. Everything okay?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just trying to stay busy, you know." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push it. "All right. Well, don't burn yourself out, okay? But the truth is, I'm terrified of being idle. Because when I'm not working, when my mind has a chance to wander, that's when the doubts creep in. That's when I start seeing shadows move in the corner of my eye, or catch a glimpse of flowing dark hair disappearing around a corner. I've stopped using dating apps altogether. The very thought of swiping through profiles makes my stomach churn. Instead, I've been trying to meet people the old-fashioned way. I joined a local photography club, started attending gallery openings, even signed up for a cooking class. Anything to make real, tangible connections with actual people. But it's not easy. Every time I meet someone new, I can't help but scrutinize them, looking for any sign that they might not be who they claim to be. Are their eyes a little too bright? Their smile a little too perfect? It's exhausting, this constant vigilance, but I can't seem to shake it. About a month after the incident, I broke down and went to see a therapist. Dr. Simmons is a kind, middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense attitude that I find oddly comforting. Of course, I couldn't tell her the whole truth. I'd have been committed on the spot. Instead, I talked about anxiety, about feeling disconnected from reality. "It sounds like you've experienced some form of dissociation," she said during one of our sessions. "Often, this can be triggered by a traumatic event. Is there anything that happened recently that might have caused this?" I hesitated, then said, "I had a bad experience with someone I met online. It didn't turn out to be what I expected." Dr. Simmons nodded sympathetically. Online interactions can be very deceptive. We project our desires and expectations onto the person on the other side of the screen, and when reality doesn't match up, it can be quite jarring. If only she knew how jarring it really was. The therapy has helped to an extent. At least I'm sleeping better most nights. But there are still moments when the world doesn't feel quite real, when I find myself questioning everything around me. Last week, I was at a coffee shop working on some freelance projects. As I was packing up to leave, a woman at the next table struck up a conversation. She was pretty, with warm brown eyes and a friendly smile. We chatted for a bit about the book she was reading, and as I was about to leave, she asked if I'd like to grab dinner sometime. For a moment, I was tempted. She seemed nice, normal, but then I remembered Lily, how she had seemed nice and normal at first, too. I politely declined, making up an excuse about being too busy with work. As I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a mistake. Was I going to let one bad experience, admittedly a supernaturally terrifying bad experience, ruin my chances at happiness forever? When I got home, I stood in front of my closet for a long time, just staring at the door. Finally, with a deep breath, I opened it. Nothing but clothes and shoes greeted me. No writhing shadows, no monstrous hands reaching out to grab me. Just my normal, mundane closet. I let out a shaky laugh, realizing how ridiculous I must look. This is what my life has become, being afraid of my own closet. That night, I had a dream. I was back in that void where Lily had taken me, surrounded by swirling colors and trapped souls. But this time I wasn't afraid. I walked through the chaos, my steps sure and steady, and as I walked, I saw the bubbles holding the other trapped men begin to pop, freeing them. I woke up feeling different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could move past this. I'm writing this all down now, partly as a form of therapy and partly as a warning. To anyone out there using dating apps, meeting strangers online, be careful. The person on the other side of the screen might not be who they claim to be. They might not even be human. But I'm also writing this as a reminder to myself. Yes, there are monsters out there. Yes, the world can be a dark and terrifying place. But there's also light and warmth and genuine human connection. And those things are worth fighting for, worth overcoming your fears for. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened to me. I don't know if Lily was some kind of supernatural entity, a glitch in reality, or just a manifestation of my own fears and insecurities. But I do know this: I survived. I faced my darkest fears and came out the other side, and if I can do that, I can do anything. Tomorrow, I think I'll go back to that coffee shop. Maybe that woman will be there again. And this time, if she asks me out, I think I'll say yes. After all, not every match is going to try to drag you into an eldritch nightmare realm, right? When I was a freshman in college, I ran into a guy I had first met when I was 16. At the time, he had that effortless charm that teenage girls can't resist. Cute, funny, and confident in a way that was just cocky enough to seem cool, but not yet annoying. We hit it off immediately, and as teenagers do, he asked me to be his girlfriend that very same day. And of course, being 16 and swept up in the thrill of what felt like fate, I said yes. The next day, though, reality came crashing in. I called him, excited to hear his voice and already mentally planning what color prom dress would match his tie. But instead of him, a girl answered the phone. "Hello?" I said, confused. "Hi," she replied politely. "Who is this?" I'm his girlfriend." I stammered, my heart sinking. "Oh, really? Well, I'm his girlfriend too," she said calmly. "So I think you've been misled." She was polite, I'll give her that, but she wasted no time in letting me know he couldn't date me because, surprise, he was already in a relationship with her. I was mortified, humiliated, sure, but mostly angry. How dare he? I muttered to myself later that night, flipping between plotting petty revenge fantasies and rolling my eyes at how dumb I'd been. And then I moved on. Or so I thought. Fast forward a few years to freshman year of college, and there he is, standing at the end of the bar like some ghost of bad decisions past. At first, I thought I was seeing things. "It can't be him," I whispered to my friend, nudging her and pointing subtly. "Who?" she asked. "That guy. The one at the end of the bar," I said. I know him." But no, it was definitely him. The same smirk, the same swagger. And because I was feeling bold, and maybe slightly fueled by vodka cranberries, I marched right up to him. "Hey," I said, leaning in like we were old friends catching up. "Do you remember me?" It took him a second. I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he tried to place my face. And then it clicked. His eyes widened just slightly, and he gave this sheepish half-smile that told me he knew. "Oh, wow, it's you," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, about back then." "Don't worry," I interrupted with a grin. "I'm over it, but man, were you a total jerk." I spent the better part of the night poking fun at him for what a total jerk he'd been. I teased him relentlessly about how he'd asked me to be his girlfriend while already having one, and then ghosted me like some teenage Houdini. All right, he said, laughing. "I deserved that. I was a stupid kid, what can I say?" At first, he just laughed it off, but then something shifted. The teasing turned into playful banter. The sarcasm softened, and before I knew it, he was poking fun at himself, owning up to his past sins with a kind of charm that I hated how much I still found attractive. One thing led to another, and suddenly we were kissing goodnight. "So, maybe I'll see you again," he said, leaning against the door as I stepped back. "Maybe," I replied, trying to play it cool, though my heart was racing. This time, I did. We started dating, not just casually either. He lived on Long Island, and I was going to school at SUNY Purchase in Westchester, but the distance didn't seem to matter. He visited me most weekends, and sometimes even during the week, always making the effort to spend time together. He was thoughtful in a way that felt surprising, given our rocky history. "I'm here to help," he said one night during the finals week, hauling a box of my stuff into his car. "You're stressing out too much." "You didn't have to come all this way," I said, though I couldn't stop smiling. "Yeah, but I wanted to," he replied. "Besides, you're terrible at packing." By the time the end of the semester rolled around, I was fully enamored. He even came up to visit me during finals week, helping me pack up my dorm room when I was too stressed and sleep-deprived to function. He carried half my stuff to his car and then drove it all the way to my parents' house, greeting them for the first time without me even being there. It was awkward, sure, but it was also so sweet and helpful that I couldn't stop gushing about it to my friends later. "He met your parents without you there?" my roommate said, incredulous. "I know, crazy, right? But he's so thoughtful," I replied, beaming. I felt like I'd finally won, like all the drama from high school had led to this moment where he was proving to me and to himself that he wasn't that immature kid anymore. I was excited, not just about him, but about the summer ahead. No more long-distance visits, no more train rides or weekend countdowns. We'd finally be in the same area, and I was ready to dive into the relationship even deeper. But then, as it turns out, some ghosts refused to stay buried. The semester ended, I moved home, and the first thing I did was call him, eager to make plans for the weekend. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Maybe he's busy, I told myself, though doubt was creeping in. After the third and fourth calls went to voicemail, the sinking feeling started to set in. I sent texts, no response. I even tried calling from my home phone, just in case he was screening my number. Still nothing. The déjà vu was unreal. It felt like history was repeating itself in the cruelest way possible. Only this time it hurt worse because I'd actually let myself believe things were different. "How could I be so stupid?" I muttered, tossing my phone onto the bed. I spent days oscillating between denial and anger, checking my phone every 5 minutes, rereading our last messages, trying to find some clue that might explain how we'd gone from making summer plans to this. Eventually, the anger won out. "I'm not crying over him again," I declared to myself, though my voice cracked. Weeks went by, and the radio silence continued. No apology, no explanation, just nothing. I never saw him again after that, but for a while, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might pop up at any moment, at a bar, at the grocery store, maybe even sliding into my DMs with some half-hearted excuse about losing his phone or having a busy summer. And you know what? If he had, I probably would have laughed in his face. It all started with a simple swipe to the right, leading me to meet a charming woman on Tinder. Happy hour at a local bar was supposed to be just that, happy. The dim lighting cast a warm glow over the polished wooden tables, while the hum of casual conversations blended with the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby group. The faint scent of citrus from freshly mixed cocktails hung in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of beer. Instead, it turned into a night I'll never forget, for all the wrong reasons. She was magnetic from the start. Charming, witty, and a natural storyteller, she had me laughing within minutes of sitting down. The lively atmosphere of the bar felt like the perfect backdrop to our instant connection. Drinks flowed, she ordered a smoky mezcal cocktail while I stuck with my usual gin and tonic. The conversation was a whirlwind of topics. Her childhood spent traveling with her parents, my recent work project that I loved complaining about, and our shared guilty pleasure of binge-watching trashy reality TV. Before I knew it, we were a few cocktails deep and comfortably tipsy. "So, should we take this party somewhere more private?" she asked, her smile playful. "You're reading my mind," I replied with a grin. When she suggested continuing the night at my place, it felt like the most natural decision in the world. The walk to my apartment was a blur of laughter, drunken karaoke renditions of bar songs, and a feeling of carefree spontaneity. "What's your go-to karaoke song?" she asked, stumbling slightly but keeping her balance. "Anything 80s pop? Yours?" "Spice Girls, obviously." We belted out snippets of Wannabe between fits of giggles. By the time we arrived, the night had taken on a surreal, almost magical quality. Music played softly in the background as we poured more drinks and settled into the cozy ambiance of my living room. "Your place is nice, definitely cleaner than I expected," she teased, winking at me. "Thanks, I try to keep it disaster-free most of the time," I joked. Everything was going perfectly, until it wasn't. Things took an unexpected turn when we moved to the bedroom. In the heat of the moment, she casually asked, "Is it okay if I'm on my period?" Yeah, that's fine," I said, trying not to sound as caught off guard as I felt. What happened next, though, was anything but fine. Without hesitation, she removed her tampon and nonchalantly tossed it onto my floor. My jaw dropped, and my mind spun in disbelief. Did that just happen? I thought, frozen in place. A flood of questions and emotions overwhelmed me. Was this normal behavior? Should I say something? Was this some kind of bizarre test? The sheer absurdity of the moment left me speechless. "Whoa, okay," I stammered, my brain struggling to catch up. She didn't seem to notice my reaction. But before I could process the situation, she abruptly leaned over and vomited everywhere. The bed, the floor, the walls. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she mumbled, her voice slurring. It's okay," I said, more to myself than to her, as I scrambled to grab towels and cleaning supplies. The fun, the laughter, the magic of the night, all gone. Panic set in as I cleaned. My hands trembled as I frantically wiped at the mess, the sour smell of vomit stinging my nose. I couldn't stop my thoughts from racing. How did things spiral so wildly out of control? The sheer chaos of the situation was overwhelming, and a sinking feeling in my chest told me this was a night I wouldn't soon forget. She was apologetic but clearly in no state to leave, and I couldn't bring myself to kick her out. "I'm such a mess," she whispered, her face buried in her hands. "Hey, it's fine. Let's just get you cleaned up, okay?" I said, trying to sound reassuring. Shifting into damage control mode, I changed the sheets, handed her clean clothes, and did my best to clean up the mess while she drifted in and out of embarrassed apologies. Once I had her settled in bed, I collapsed on the couch, my mind racing and exhaustion finally overtaking me. The morning light revealed the chaos left behind. The used tampon still on the floor, the soiled sheets in a pile, and the lingering smell of alcohol and regret. But instead of dwelling on the absurdity of the situation, I decided to just deal with it. After gathering the laundry, I glanced around the room one last time. The damage felt monumental in the cold light of day. Stains on the walls, a few broken glassware pieces from the hurried cleanup, and a pervasive smell that would likely take days to fade. It felt like the aftermath of a bizarre, surreal battle. I can't believe last night," she said quietly, avoiding eye contact as I dropped her off at her place. "Yeah, me neither," I replied with a weak smile. Both of us were too embarrassed to say much more. Later that day, as I waited for the dryer at the laundromat, I replayed the night in my head. How had it escalated so quickly? A simple Tinder match, some cocktails, and one poorly timed question had snowballed into the most chaotic evening of my life. I couldn't stop shaking my head at the absurdity of it all. On my way home, I stopped by a coffee shop to grab a much-needed pick-me-up. As I sat with my latte, I couldn't help but eavesdrop on the conversation at the next table. A couple laughing over a wild Tinder story of their own. It felt oddly comforting to know I wasn't the only one with a disaster story to tell. Who knew a simple swipe could lead to this kind of chaos? It started with a happy hour and ended with me, tampons and laundry at dawn. I leaned back in my chair and chuckled softly, shaking my head again. Well, that's one for the books, I muttered to myself. A Tinder story for the ages, sure, but one I'd probably never share, at least not until now. They say you never know what you're swiping into, and after this, I think I'll take a long break from dating apps. I met Sam on OkCupid. She was butch, chunky, and just super gay, and I was immediately obsessed. She messaged me first, just a simple, "Hey, you're cute." Normally, a message like that wouldn't have caught my attention. It was basic, generic, the kind of opener that felt like it required zero effort. But here's the thing. When you're a masculine of center woman like me, being approached by another masculine woman feels about as rare as spotting a double rainbow or winning the lottery. It just doesn't happen. I wasn't about to let the opportunity pass me by. We started chatting, and before long, we decided to meet up. "How about my favorite bar?" she suggested. "It's got cheap drinks and a vibe you'll love." The bar was a dimly lit dive, its walls covered with faded band posters and the faint smell of spilled beer lingering in the air. Mismatched furniture filled the room, giving it a curated chaos that felt oddly charming. It was the kind of place where you could disappear into the ambiance, lose yourself in the hum of casual conversations and clinking glasses. "I hope you don't mind loud cars," she said, as I noticed her ridiculous, boxy, and way too loud vehicle pulling up. I laughed it off, even though it reminded me of my mom's old car, a red flag I chose to ignore. "Nice ride," I teased, and she rolled her eyes with a smirk. Her car was a relic of the past, its rusted edges telling stories of adventures I could only imagine. As we drove through the city, I couldn't help but notice how every detail about her, from her worn-out leather jacket to her confident smirk, screamed individuality. Over the next few months, we hung out. Hung out, in quotes, because we never officially defined what we were doing. "So, are we a thing or just vibing?" I asked once, half joking. She shrugged and said, "Labels are overrated." We didn't slap labels on it, but we definitely acted like a couple, or at least I did. I went to shows where her band played, pretending to care about their moody, experimental sound that mostly involved banging on drums and yelling. The venues were always dim and smoky, with the crowd swaying to the dissonant beats. "You're killing it out there," I told her after a set, even though the noise left my ears ringing. "Thanks, BizCass," she teased, pointing at my blazer, always bringing that business casual energy. Her very cute cats, more emotionally available than she was, became my new best friends. "You're lucky I like them more than you," I joked one day, scratching behind their ears. Their soft purring filled the quiet spaces in her apartment, a comforting counterpoint to her restless energy. "Yeah, I get that a lot," she replied with a grin. Despite the charm, her flakiness was a recurring thorn in our relationship. "Dinner at 7?" I'd ask. "Yeah, sure," she'd say, only to cancel last minute. "Rain check? I'm not feeling it tonight." One time she begged me to buy tickets for a gong bath. Yes, a gong bath. Weeks in advance. On the day of, she sighed dramatically. Ugh, do we really have to go? Let's just stay in and chill. I was ready, though. Fine, but we're doing this with style, I said, pulling out a cheese board and cider flight. She laughed despite herself. You're unreal, you know that? She said, shaking her head but smiling nonetheless. The gong bath incident wasn't isolated. Sam had a knack for creating grand plans, only to backpedal when the moment arrived. And yet, I kept showing up, telling myself her free-spirited nature balanced my need for structure. Then came the kidney stones. After a boozy brunch, I ended up in the ER. The fluorescent lights of the hospital cast a cold glow over everything, amplifying my discomfort. You okay? Do you need anything? She texted while I was doped up on pain meds. I'm fine, I replied, not wanting her to see me in that state. But the next day she flaked again. Can't make it tonight, she wrote. Need some alone time with my guitar. Your guitar? I muttered, furious. I ignored her texts, assuming we were done. But late that night she texted again. Can I come over, please? Against my better judgment, I said yes. When she arrived, I was still weak and recovering. I'm sorry, she whispered, curling up beside me as we watched X-Files. I'll make it up to you. By morning, I softened. Nobody's perfect, I told myself, choosing to forgive her. As I walked her to the door, she kissed me goodbye and said, "Have a nice life." I laughed. Funny, I said, waiting for her to crack a smile, but she didn't. Wait, you're serious? I asked, stunned. Yeah, she replied simply, take care. And just like that, she was gone. No texts, no calls, nothing. She vanished, leaving me with memories, lingering questions and the scent of patchouli on my pillows. The apartment felt emptier without her chaotic energy, the silence a sharp contrast to the vibrant whirlwind she had been. Each room seemed to echo her absence, from the faint indentations on the couch to the lingering remnants of her favorite vinyl records scattered haphazardly. It took me a while to process. How dare she just disappear? I ranted to friends. But secretly, I felt almost impressed. Such a bold exit, I admitted. Only someone like her could pull that off. In hindsight, Sam had been a lesson in contradictions. She was a fleeting force of nature, someone who barreled through life unapologetically, leaving a trail of chaos and charm. While her departure left me reeling, it also reminded me of the beauty in embracing impermanence. Looking back, I sometimes think maybe she was never meant to stay. I was never a fan of dating apps, but after my last breakup, my friend suggested I try Tinder, saying that it would make my dating life alive and fun again. Flying around and swiping random guys left or right, one of the profiles really caught my eye. It was a single pic, very closely taken, focused on the deep blue eyes of Ethan. Truth is not always what you see through your eyes, his bio read. Out of sheer curiosity, I swiped right. We matched, and eventually our conversation led us to meet up face to face. After some coffee at a place near my apartment, Ethan invited me for dinner at his apartment. As we ate dinner in the flickering candlelight, I couldn't help but admire Ethan's face. His sharp jawline made my heart skip a beat. His Tinder profile hadn't captured the intensity in his eyes enough. There was a kind of manic hunger in them that sent a shiver down my spine, yet there was an undeniable magnetism about him, a darkness that repelled and attracted me. Our conversation flowed surprisingly well. We bonded over underrated art and banned literature. He spoke of his love for Edgar Allan Poe, reciting verses about love and loss with a chilling intensity. As the night progressed, Ethan suggested we move to his balcony. How about we get some fresh air? You'll love the view from here. I hesitated at first. The small, cluttered balcony felt oddly claustrophobic. But Ethan's smile, boyish and disarming, made me comfortable. The view from the balcony wasn't bad. The city lights below looked like scattered diamonds, but there was something very odd stuck in the air, making me wrinkle my nose. Something smells meaty, I commented, noticing a covered grill tucked in the corner. Ethan gave a creepy laugh, a hollow sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Just a little lamb burger, he said, his voice too casual. Family recipe, he whispered with a grin. He lifted the lid, revealing a sizzling patty. My stomach twisted. The lamb looked unnaturally dark, the edges grilled black. Suddenly, I noticed something more on the patty. There was a long strand of blonde hair wrapped around it. I felt like throwing up. "Whoa, that doesn't look too good. It's making me sick," I mumbled, backing away. All of a sudden, Ethan's smile disappeared. His eyes narrowed, the charming personality replaced by a cold, dangerous gleam. "I promise you'll love the taste of it. Just give it a try, Monica." The words sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I don't feel well. I need to go." "No, you don't," he growled, grabbing my hand with surprising strength. "What are you doing?" I screamed, trying to free myself. "Don't you see?" he hissed. His expression was now a mix of anger and desperation. We were meant to be together forever. The smell in the air intensified. Desperate by sheer terror, I wrestled free. I stumbled back, tripping over a metal bucket that was resting in the corner of the balcony. It clanged loudly, revealing its gruesome contents: a bleached skull and several long bones. Ethan raged at me again. "Monica, don't ruin the food!" But this time I was ready. With a rush of adrenaline, grabbing a metal spatula kept on top of the hot grill, I swung it at Ethan blindly. The thudding sound of metal on bone echoed in the night. Ethan fell to the ground, a choked gasp escaping his lips. I was staring at him, the spatula trembling in my hand. Nausea threatened to overwhelm me again, but this time it was mixed with a horrifying realization. The burger, the bones, Ethan's words, they all clicked into place. He wasn't just a psycho, he was a monster who couldn't handle rejection, and I was about to become another entry in his collection of discarded dates. Dazed and trembling, I ran to the lobby outside his apartment and called 911. The image of Ethan's twisted face and the gruesome contents of the bucket made my fingers tremble while I dialed the call. Ethan remained unconscious until the police arrived. A group of them got inside his apartment while I was escorted out by the paramedics. But even amidst the flashing lights and concerned questions, I was not able to shake the feeling of fear. God, I was on a date with a cannibal. The following days were a blur. News reports buzzed with Ethan's arrest. The police had discovered a hidden room in his apartment filled with the remains of young women. Each had matched with Ethan on dating apps, each lured under the pretense of romance. As the only alive key witness, my story is a chilling testament to the monster who hid behind a charming facade. Yet, a part of my mind remained haunted. The lingering smell and those horrific laughs in my nightmares. The echo of Ethan's words, "We were meant to be together forever," served as a constant reminder of the night I danced with death on a balcony bathed in moonlight. It was 9 years ago when I matched with Olivia on Tinder. She was 36, divorced, and living in a suburban area not far from my apartment. At 28, I was just looking for some fun, to be honest, and Olivia seemed perfect. We clicked instantly, bonding over a shared love for classic rock, horror movies, and a mutual disdain for small-town gossip. There was a spark between us, an electric attraction, so to say. You like the Rolling Stones? No way, they're my favorite band. Yeah, I saw them live back in '99. That was a wild night. We decided to meet at a quiet bar she recommended. I remember the place well, dimly lit with old wooden booths and a jukebox that played nothing but '80s hits. And then she walked in. Olivia was stunning. She had this effortless charm, a confident gait, and, well, a smoking hot body. We laughed, flirted, and drank more than we probably should have. She was blunt about her intentions. I hope age isn't a damper. I mean, look at you. You can't be 8 years older than me. I'll be honest, Ethan. I like going around with younger men, and I'm not looking for anything. Just so you know, it's a one-night thing. Sounds perfect to me. We left the bar, and Olivia invited me to her place. Her bungalow was old, with a Victorian style that looked kind of unsettling under the moonlight. My drunken brain felt a twinge of unease as soon as I stepped inside. The house was beautifully maintained but had an unnerving air about it. The living room had antique furniture, dark wood paneling, and heavy drapes. But something didn't fit. The creamy, textured carpet. It clashed with the decor, standing out like a sore thumb. Nice place you got here. Daddy sells oil. Daddy shot himself when I was 3. I got the place in the divorce. My ex-husband was into real estate. Want another drink? She handed me a glass of whiskey, and we settled on the couch. Her touch was intoxicating, and soon our fingers were exploring each other's while our eyes locked. There was something about her brutal honesty, her charm, and her confidence that had me drunk, other than the Jack Daniels. You have great taste in decor. Very vintage. I'm a sucker for antiques. They have a history, a story to tell, just like us. Oh, and what's our story? 2 strangers meeting by chance and sharing an adventure. Sounds exciting. What kind of adventure do you have in mind? One that starts with good whiskey and ends with, well, we'll see. I like the sound of that. You're full of surprises, aren't you? Only the good kind. What about you? What surprises do you have up your sleeve? You'll have to stick around to find out. I think I just might. So, tell me, what is a handsome guy like you doing on Tinder? Looking for someone intriguing. I guess I found her. Flattery will get you everywhere. Good to know. And what about you? Why Tinder? Not many places for women like me to find young men like you. Lively, huh? I can do lively. I bet you can. Shall we take this adventure downstairs? I have a special room for my guests. Lead the way. But as she grabbed my arm to lead me to her bedroom, a wave of nausea hit me. I stumbled, and before I could stop myself, it came out. I vomited all over the carpet. I remember Olivia's demeanor changing in an instant. She flew into a fit of rage, rushing to grab a mop, her face twisted with anger. You idiot, you ruined my carpet. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I sewed it with my hands. The one thing in this house that doesn't remind me of my sick ex-husband, and now your bile is swimming over it. Realizing I had blown my chance, I mumbled an apology and hurried out of the house. My head was spinning, my stomach churning. I made it home and collapsed into bed, cursing my capacity for ruining what would have been a glorious night. Now, 9 years later, I saw her face plastered on the news. Olivia, now 45, was arrested. A secret torture room was uncovered in the basement of her bungalow where she kept young men and tortured them. One of her victims had managed to escape and alerted the authorities. The police found evidence of cannibalism, token parts of previous lovers she had taken, and the final horrifying reveal: a carpet made of human skin. I sat there, staring at the TV in disbelief. The creamy, textured carpet flashed in my mind, and a chill ran down my spine as I realized how lucky I was. When I matched with David on Tinder, I couldn't believe that he'd swiped right on me. He was 27, an Australian globetrotter with an infectious smile and tousled blonde hair. His tan was just perfect. It had to be because he surfed, and he wore an intriguing blue-beaded necklace in every photo. We started flirting over texts almost immediately. "So, what does a gorgeous girl like you do for fun on a gorgeous Boston evening like today besides swiping on Tinder?" "Mostly exploring the city and avoiding bad dates." "Oh, you deserve a good one. Drinks tomorrow night?" "Smooth." "Wow, you don't waste time, do you?" "Why waste it? It's the most precious thing in the world. Well, except for that smile of yours." He was good. We exchanged numbers and decided to meet at a pub downtown. The night came, and I was nervous but excited. I arrived early, found a table, and waited, and then waited some more. Rejected 2 advances from strangers for him and let a martini sit, hoping that my surfer boy would surface. But he didn't. An hour passed and still no David. It was then that it dawned on me. He had stood me up. I rushed back to my place. Even my calls weren't getting placed. Frustrated, I texted him. "Hey, where are you? I was waiting for you for over an hour. I was there at the pub, didn't see you." "See this? Men and their lies for real. Stop disappointing me further." "You need proof? Here you go." He sent a photo of the pub. It was from the same night, judging by the people and the lighting. "Where were you?" "Near the jukebox." How could we have not seen each other? God knows. I was confused. Something didn't feel right to me. I'm not sure that meeting up would be a good idea. His responses caught me off guard. What harm could a coffee do? So reluctantly, I agreed. But stupid me, the same thing happened again. I sat there in the cafe feeling more and more foolish as time passed. Eventually, I had to get up and leave. I couldn't believe that the guy had made a fool of me not once, but twice. When I texted him angrily, he simply replied with another photo, this time of the cafe from that evening. "This is ridiculous. Are you messing with me?" "No, I swear I was there. Maybe we just keep missing each other." "I tried to call you from the cafe. There was no ring." I have some troubles with my American SIM card. Need Wi-Fi to make calls." That was it. I wasn't going to be fooled twice. I blocked his number, chalking it up to a bizarre catfishing experience. Months passed, and I forgot about David. But then one night, while out at the club with friends, I saw him. The same tousled hair, the same blue-beaded necklace. He stood in the distance, almost like a shadow, but I could feel his eyes upon me. My heart raced as I approached him, but he vanished into the crowd. Back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Curiosity and a lingering sense of unease led me to unblock David's number. I called him, but again, there was no ring. Surprisingly, a few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo of the nightclub from that very night. What the hell is going on? Just wanted to see you again. I owed you some answers. Anger surged through me, but before I could respond, another message came through. This one was a newspaper clipping with David's picture. The headline read, "Australian surfer, 4th victim of the Boston Barbie, matched on Tinder the night before his poisoning." My blood ran cold. I stared at the clipping, which proclaimed that David was dead. He had been dead for months, murdered by a serial killer. My hands trembled as I typed a reply. "This isn't funny. How are you sending these? Thank you for liberating me." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo of me taken from behind. I was sitting on my couch, staring at my phone in horror. Every hair on my body stood on end. I gathered the courage to turn around, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. Instead, on the floor, where no one had been a moment before, lay David's blue-beaded necklace. There was no bio on Ruth's profile, only pictures, and within a handful of messages she'd asked me over to her place. Straight out of the gate, there were 2 red flags, but she swore she wasn't a catfish, so I suggested we grab a cheeky pint first. That way, if a hairy biker dude turned up and made kissy faces at me, I could make a speedy getaway through the fire exit. Ruth looked like a Greek goddess in her thigh-high skirt and trench coat. She had these stunning onyx eyes and almost seemed to glow in the dinky little pub. Every time she tossed her hair, the other drinkers stole glances in the back bar mirror. She looked different from the photos, sure, but still leagues above me. I went for a hug, which she redirected into a firm handshake. Ruth wore thick winter gloves, even though the fireplace in the corner was roaring. As I caught a trace of her scent, fresh and lovely, a sensible voice at the back of my mind screamed, "What's the catch?" Surely, any second now she'd trick me into emptying my bank account. Crap. Maybe she'd already swiped my credit card. I patted my pockets. Wallet, phone, Pokemon keychain. Nope. All there. Already the marshal waving that 3rd red flag was a speck in the rearview mirror. The bartender took our orders. I asked for a pint of Guinness, whereas Ruth stuck with tap water. Then we eased into a conversation about our lives. When I started telling her about life in the bitey game, she yawned sarcastically. Chuckling, I said, "Well, what do you do then?" "I'm between jobs." "Between what and what?" "Between surgeon and anything that doesn't involve bodily fluids." "Huh? I thought they might have warned you about those in medical school." I didn't always have a problem with them. There was a traumatizing experience. She shuddered as if reliving a painful memory. "Anyway, let's talk about your sex life." Caught off guard, I spat a mouthful of Guinness all over the counter. An agitated Ruth grabbed a wet wipe from her pocket, cleared the mess, and then readjusted the placemats and ashtray so everything aligned perfectly. The ginger bartender side-eyed her but said nothing. The beautiful brunette told me she had a bunch of kinks, and I'd be lying if I told you my heart didn't flutter a little. She asked whether I was ready for another drink. I was, although I took small, steady sips because I never could handle my alcohol. Any more than 4 pints usually resulted in me clinging onto the toilet bowl like a life raft. Finally, I just came out with what was nagging at me. "Ruth, don't take this the wrong way, but are you real?" Like, what's the catch here? Am I going to wake up tomorrow missing a kidney? That made her chuckle. "I'll be honest," she said. "There is a catch. I'll tell you if you promise not to make fun of me." I crossed my heart. She leaned close, pushed her pouty lips right up against my ear and said, "I'm a clean freak, like a major clean freak. If you come back to my place tonight, I need you to wash yourself the second we get there." As her gloved finger ran along my shirt collar, she fought the urge to retch. "Those clothes will need cleaning too. I've got a fresh pair you can borrow, and you must brush your teeth. Also, have you got an earwax remover with you? If not, you can borrow one from my emergency kit." I asked whether she was serious. "Deadly. I absolutely cannot stand filth. I need you spotless. Sound good?" A winning lottery ticket had blown into my hand. I finished my pint in one long gulp, wiped away my foam mustache and said, "Sounds great." In the front seat of her Volvo, Ruth handed me a breath mint, probably because a trace of my aunt's famous cottage pie lingered on my breath. She drove west out of town toward an ultra-modern house standing against the forest. The straight angles of the white building looked odd, juxtaposed against the pine trees, and there was an angular barrier around back keeping the vermin at bay. The sterile stench of disinfectant stung my nostrils the second we stepped through the front door. Everything was meticulously organized, all straight lines and spotless, like something from an IKEA catalog. You could have performed open-heart surgery in any room. There wasn't a single piece of furniture not covered in plastic. 2 stuffed kittens batting invisible strings stood guard in the downstairs landing. "Aren't they cute?" Ruth asked when she noticed me staring. It's like she occupied an alternative, shrink-wrapped universe. She made me kick off my shoes. Then I followed her to the end of the hall. Standing in the middle of the bathroom, she watched as I stripped off. Her neutral expression stung. She grabbed my clothes into a zip-locked bag, which she held away from herself like radioactive waste, and then she provided clear instructions about which soap and shampoo I needed to use. I bit down on the temptation to tell her I'd been washing myself for years. The sarcasm, probably what kept me single for so long, and stepped into the shower. Ruth left a white linen shirt and a pair of jeans folded neatly over the towel rack. The earwax remover on the edge of the sink operated like something out of Star Trek. I figured out the settings eventually, though. In the lounge, she handed me a shot of something fruity and sour. We clinked glasses and drank. The liquid burned on the way down. I went to sit on the sofa, but the plastic made it slicker than a water slide. I fell to the ground, and before I could pick myself up, my head got heavy and the air became stale. What happened next is a blur. 1 minute, the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Next, I'm flat on my back. My legs were stuck. Alcohol was sloshing around the pit of my stomach, and breathing was borderline impossible. I made myself look down, a surprisingly difficult process. Past the end of the bed, Ruth rose into view, a mean-spirited grin on her face. She was encasing my legs with shrink wrap like an Egyptian mummy, gradually working her way north. I opened my mouth. No words came out. "Shh, this won't take long," she said. She swung her leg over my midsection, straddling me. Then she leaned forward and pushed her lips against my ear. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'm going to take care of you. You look so handsome, all lovely and spotless. I'm just making sure you stay that way. Forever." Her tongue probed the inside of my ear, and then she went to fetch medical equipment from the corner of the room. My brain couldn't piece the mess together, but I knew I needed to get out of there, fast. I tried flexing my leg muscles but lacked the strength. Ruth's arms clamped tight around my ankles. "Stop. You're messing everything up." With all the energy I could summon, I thrashed from side to side until I fell off the bed. The wooden floor hit worse than concrete. I opened my mouth to groan, but instead a great flood of vomit shot out as if launched by a supercharged sprinkler. Chunks of cottage pie flew in every direction. A fountain of half-digested beef mince, onions, carrots, and garlic. Ruth rushed over to restrain me, but I rolled away, and as I did, her shoes skidded through the rancid contents of my stomach and she fell. The germaphobe popped right back up. She looked at her palms, then the wet patches all down her back, and then her throat made this strangled sound like a cat hacking up a fur ball. She grabbed a set of wet wipes and started scrubbing herself clean, furiously. Sensing an opportunity to escape, I crawled away like a worm, leaving behind a snail trail of barf. "Get back here!" Ruth screamed. She physically couldn't stop scrubbing her hands long enough to come after me. I crawled down the hall around a bend. At one point, I needed to use the crown of my head to force a door open. The entire time, I was coughing and trying to keep that morning's breakfast from creeping up in my throat. Soon, I was conscious enough to realize my left arm was free, whereas the right was pinned against my torso. To my left was the kitchen. Maybe there was a sharp object there I could cut the shrink wrap with. I fumbled towards a central island, crawled up the side, and pulled on a drawer. Cutlery fell all around me with a series of metal clangs, followed by the drawer. My free hand dug through the pile for a knife, finding only spoons. Finally, I grabbed a fork and stabbed at the wrap until my other arm came free, I was like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. Footsteps came shuffling toward the kitchen. Freeing my legs would take way too long. They still only had a few inches of wiggle room. I would be at Ruth's mercy. Just then, something rancid slid up my throat, so I opened my mouth and spat a fat, sticky oyster of what had once been scrambled eggs and bacon, but now looked like an alien life form, into my palm. The beautiful psycho burst through the door. In her hand was a syringe. She launched herself on top of me. My left hand caught her forearm at the last possible second while the right smeared my biological weapon across her face. As the vomit omelet dripped from her cheek in fat glops, she released the needle and went into furious convulsions. Quickly, I rolled on top of her, grabbed the fallen drawer, and bashed her across the side of the skull. I did this until her eyes rolled back, then I crawled away on my elbows. In the hall, there was a phone on top of a side table. I punched in 999. The operator couldn't understand me, but sent a squad car anyway. I remember telling myself to stay awake in case my kidnapper recovered, but here my memory jump cuts to a circle of emergency responders staring down at me. The officers had a hard time believing my story. A concussed Ruth said I went crazy and attacked her. On the way to the station, they took us to the hospital to patch up our cuts and bruises. Everybody seemed to believe I was the aggressor, until the police searched the area surrounding the house. In the forest, they spotted a pack of rats scurrying around some bushes, and beneath it there was a body, partially buried, badly decomposed, and wrapped in plastic. A post-mortem confirmed it was the corpse of a local man who'd disappeared 6 months earlier. I'd seen his mother crying on TV. There were holes in the crotch and left arm of his shrink-wrapped prison where they believed a catheter and IV drip had been inserted so Ruth could keep the poor guy alive, but in a state which prevented him from contaminating her perfect house. Ruth is denying any wrongdoing. Hopefully the prosecutors get their act together soon, although I'm told it could take a year before sentencing. Feels of justice and all that. I'm still on the road to recovery, mentally speaking, but I'm ready to start looking for love again. Dinner with the devil, my night with a plastic surgeon. The evening began as one of those dates that seemed perfect on paper. A charming plastic surgeon, a Porsche Cayenne gleaming under the streetlights, and a reservation at one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive steakhouses. But by the time dessert was served, the night had unraveled into something out of a dark, twisted nightmare. I met Dr. Alan Maddox on a dating app. His profile oozed confidence, a successful career, a taste for art and fine dining, and a meticulously curated collection of photos showcasing his luxurious lifestyle. When he picked me up in his Porsche, it was clear he wanted to impress. The car was flawless, its leather seats exuding a faint, expensive cologne. He wasted no time pointing out the bespoke features, his pride radiating like a second skin. "Nice ride," I said, running my hand over the smooth dashboard. "You must love this car." "It's not just a car," Alan replied with a grin. "It's an extension of success. People see this, and they know I've arrived." We arrived at Cut, a restaurant famous for its marble interiors, exquisite steaks, and exorbitant prices. The lighting was dim and strategic, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Alan strode in like a man who believed the world revolved around him, tossing his keys to the valet with a practiced air of entitlement. "You'll love this place," he said, as the hostess led us to a secluded corner table. "Best steak in the city. I've taken some very important clients here." "Oh, so I'm important now?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. "More than you know," he said, his smile sharp and calculated. Alan's love affair with his own voice became evident the moment we sat down. He launched into a detailed monologue about his career, recounting tales of reconstructive miracles and cosmetic triumphs. "You wouldn't believe the transformations I've pulled off," he said, leaning in conspiratorially. "People come to me broken, and I make them whole again. It's not just surgery, it's art." At first, I tried to participate, asking questions and nodding along. "What's the most challenging case you've worked on?" I asked. "Oh, there's too many to count," he replied, waving his hand dismissively. "But they all leave with a story worth telling, and a bill worth every penny." When the sommelier arrived, Alan ordered an outrageously expensive bottle of wine without so much as glancing in my direction. "This one's a favorite," he said, turning to me. "You'll taste the subtle notes of blackberry and oak. It's a masterpiece, really." "I'll take your word for it," I said, trying to suppress a smile. That's when an idea struck me. If this man wanted to put on a show, I could play along, but I'd add a twist. Leaning forward, I fixed him with a curious gaze and asked, "Have you heard about the latest trend in your field? Some surgeons are using fat cells from cadavers for cosmetic procedures." Alan's confident smile froze. "That's ridiculous," he said, his voice tight. "No ethical surgeon would ever—" "Oh, so it's not your side hustle?" I asked innocently, tilting my head. He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Excuse me." "You know," I continued, "just a little extra income on the side. It's lucrative, right?" His face flushed an alarming shade of red and his eyes narrowed. "How dare you?" His voice cut through the low hum of the restaurant. "You think you can sit there and question me?" Before I could respond, Alan's composure shattered. He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the cutlery and silencing the nearby diners. "You have no idea what it takes to succeed in my field," he roared, his voice echoing through the room. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, he flipped the table. Plates, glasses, and that absurdly expensive bottle of wine crashed to the floor in a symphony of breaking glass and gasps of horror. "Alan!" I exclaimed, stunned. "What the hell are you doing?" "You'll regret this," he snapped, his voice trembling with rage. "Mark my words." The entire restaurant froze. Diners gawked as Alan stormed toward the exit, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Servers scrambled to contain the chaos, their faces pale with shock. I remained seated, too stunned to move, my pulse hammering in my ears. A manager hurried over, apologizing profusely and offering to cover the cost of the meal. "We're so sorry about this, ma'am. Please, let us bring you something else." "I think I've had enough excitement for one night," I replied, shaking my head. As I stepped outside, the valet approached with a card in hand. "Dr. Maddox left this for you," he said, hesitating before handing it over. Scrawled on the back was a note, "Call me if you're ready for round 2. I stared at the card, disbelief and dark amusement swirling in my chest. "Unbelievable," I muttered under my breath. As I walked to my car, I realized I hadn't paid a single cent for the night, an unexpected perk of enduring Alan's meltdown. Still, the events replayed in my mind like a surreal horror film. Somewhere between the shadows of the dimly lit street and the cold night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that Alan's mask had slipped, revealing something darker beneath. One thing was certain, I'd never look at a Porsche the same way again. It all started when the guy I'm talking to invited me to his friend's barbecue. It wasn't just a short drive down the road. It was all the way in the next county over. The journey itself was picturesque, with rolling hills and winding roads bordered by dense patches of trees. Occasionally, I passed quaint little farmhouses with smoke curling out of their chimneys, and the setting sun bathed everything in a golden glow, almost making me forget my initial reservations. The journey itself was picturesque, with rolling hills and winding roads, the kind of scenery that almost made me forget my initial reservations. But here's the thing, he's charming, funny, and not bad on the eyes. So, against my better judgment and the advice of every rom-com ever, I decide to make the trek. "Let me know when you're about 10 minutes away," he texts me. Like clockwork, I let him know when I'm close. His response, "I'm still at the gym, so I'll be there in 20. And there it was, my first red flag. Now, I've seen my share of pink flags, yellow flags, maybe even some chartreuse flags. But this was a bona fide crimson banner flapping in the wind. Yet, somehow, instead of making a U-turn and calling it a day, I decided to press on. The drive, with its serene countryside views, felt oddly dissonant with the growing unease in my chest. When he finally arrives, I'm ready to chalk it up to poor time management. Everyone has their quirks, right? But then he opens the door to his apartment, and suddenly I'm in the middle of a Hoarders episode. The apartment smelled faintly of old laundry and something vaguely sour. There's laundry draped over the kitchen table, like some kind of makeshift tablecloth, giving off a faint, musty smell. Dirty dishes stacked precariously in the sink emitted a sour tang that mingled unpleasantly with the lingering odor of stale cat food. Enough cat hair floated around the dimly lit room to knit a whole new cat, clinging to every surface as though marking its territory. The dim lighting only added to the sense of chaos, casting shadows that seemed to deepen the clutter. I'm standing there, trying to navigate the minefield of bad first impressions, when he casually announces, "I'm going to hop in the shower real quick." And then it happens. He leaves the bathroom door open. Open. The sound of water splashing echoed through the tiny apartment. Now, I'm not a prude, but there's a level of intimacy that shouldn't happen before appetizers at a barbecue. I take a deep breath, stare at the cluttered ceiling with its faint water stains, and start mentally drafting an escape plan. But alas, I'm already in too deep. Part of me is morbidly curious to see where this evening could possibly go. Showered and somewhat presentable, with damp hair slicked back and wearing a wrinkled polo shirt that looked hastily pulled from a pile, we head to his car. The interior of the car was slightly better, no visible trash, but the lingering smell of gym clothes hinted at some forgotten duffel bag in the trunk. As we drive to the barbecue, I'm trying to get my head in the game. Maybe his friends will redeem him. Maybe the food will be spectacular. But just as I'm starting to convince myself that this night could turn around, he hits me with, "I should probably tell you something before we get there." My stomach dropped, a cold wave of apprehension washing over me. I gripped the edge of my seat, already bracing for the worst. Oh no, nothing good ever starts with, "I should probably tell you something." He goes on to explain that one of the attendees is another girl he met on Tinder. "Excuse me?" I whip my head around so fast I'm surprised I didn't sprain my neck. "You didn't think last night was a better time to tell me about this?" I demand. He has the audacity to say, "I didn't think you'd come if you knew." "Well, congratulations, Sherlock. You're absolutely right," I snap. But here I am, trapped in this moving car halfway to his friend's house, on what is shaping up to be the weirdest situation I've ever found myself in. The rest of the ride is tense, filled with the hum of the radio and the occasional awkward cough. When we finally get to the barbecue, I'm already plotting his downfall. But then I meet his friends. They're warm, funny, and have gone all out with the food. The backyard is a cozy haven, strung with fairy lights and filled with the mouth-watering aroma of grilled meat. I mean, we're talking ribs that fall off the bone, grilled veggies seasoned to perfection, and a dessert spread that could rival a bakery. So despite my fury, I decide to slap on my polite face and enjoy the meal. After all, why should their effort go to waste just because their friend is an idiot? Then she arrives. The other girl. She walked in with a hesitant smile, holding a small bouquet of flowers, clearly trying to make a good impression. Let me tell you, I had braced myself for awkward, but nothing could prepare me for the bizarre spectacle that unfolded. She walked in with a hesitant smile, holding a small bouquet of flowers, clearly trying to make a good impression. As the introductions are made, I start sizing her up. And here's the kicker. She's sweet, like really sweet. Her voice is soft, her laugh infectious, and she's clearly not in on this social experiment we've both been dragged into, and suddenly, I don't even feel competitive. I feel sorry for her. But that doesn't mean I'm going down without a fight. If this was going to turn into some kind of weird Tinder eliminate showdown, I was prepared to win. Except, as I sipped on my third glass of wine and watched the chaos unfold, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't want to win. This wasn't a prize worth fighting for. I wasn't about to engage in some Hunger Games-esque battle for a guy who couldn't even bother to clean his apartment before inviting someone over. So I do the only logical thing. I stand up, put my napkin down, and look his friend square in the eye. "Thank you so much for dinner," I say, my tone dripping with gratitude. Then I turn to him. "Go ahead and sit back down. You're pretty worthless to me." I can still see the look of confusion on his face as I walked out of that backyard with my head held high. It was a glorious moment. The cool night air felt invigorating as I called an Uber, rode back to my car, and blasted empowering breakup songs all the way home. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was cheering me on. In the early hours of September 15th, 2019, 23-year-old Emma Clark awoke in her cozy Hertfordshire home, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Today was the day she would begin her solo adventure, a journey that would take her from the familiar streets of England to the exotic landscapes of South America and beyond. Emma had always been a spirited, adventurous soul, with a zest for life that inspired those around her. Little did she know this journey would lead her not to the thrill of exploration, but to a terrifying fate. Emma packed her bags meticulously, double-checking her travel itinerary, her mind buzzing with anticipation. Her family waved her off with smiles, unaware that this would be the last time they would see her alive. At Gatwick Airport, Emma boarded her flight to Colombia, the first leg of her journey. She spent the next 2 weeks hopping from island to island, soaking in the vibrant culture and breathtaking scenery. But as her journey continued, an ominous shadow began to loom over her path, one that she could never have anticipated. On October 1st, Emma arrived in Auckland, New Zealand. The city greeted her with open arms, a bustling hub of culture and natural beauty. Emma checked into a quaint hostel nestled in the heart of the city, eager to explore everything Auckland had to offer. She quickly made friends with other travelers, her outgoing personality drawing people to her like a magnet. Despite the excitement of her travels, Emma was beginning to feel the pangs of loneliness, a longing for connection in a foreign land. That evening, as she sat in her bunk, she decided to try something new. She opened the Tinder app on her phone, her fingers hesitating momentarily before swiping through the profiles. She wasn't necessarily looking for love, just someone to share a drink with, someone to talk to, someone to make her feel a little less alone. After a few swipes, she came across a profile that intrigued her. A man named Mark. His photos were ordinary, his bio unassuming, but there was something about him that caught her attention. They matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed easily between them. Mark was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. They made plans to meet the next day, and as Emma drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. She told her new friends at the hostel about her upcoming date, her smile bright and hopeful. She had no idea that this seemingly innocent decision would lead her down a path of unimaginable terror. The next day, October 2nd, Emma spent the morning exploring the city, her thoughts frequently drifting back to her upcoming date. As evening approached, she returned to the hostel to get ready, her heart fluttering with anticipation. She chose her outfit carefully, wanting to make a good impression. By the time she was ready to leave, the sun had begun to set, casting a golden hue over the city. Emma took one last look in the mirror before heading out, her reflection showing nothing but excitement and optimism. She met Mark at Sky City, a popular bar and casino in Auckland, at precisely 5:45 p.m. The CCTV cameras captured their first meeting, Emma's face lighting up as she greeted Mark with a warm hug. They made their way inside, the neon lights of the casino reflecting in their eyes. Over drinks, they talked about their lives, their travels, their hopes and dreams. Emma felt an instant connection with Mark, her initial nervousness melting away as the evening went on. She even took a moment to message a friend back home, telling her how well the date was going. As the night progressed, they moved from one bar to another, their laughter echoing through the night. At the Mexican cafe, they shared stories of their adventures, their drinks clinking together in a toast to new friendships. At the Blue Stone Room, the atmosphere grew more intimate. Mark leaned in closer, their hands brushing against each other, a spark of something more than friendship beginning to ignite. They kissed several times, their connection deepening with each passing moment. Emma felt like she was in a dream. A perfect night in a perfect city with someone who seemed to understand her in ways others hadn't. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. Mark's charm, his wit, the way he made her feel, there was something unsettling about it, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. But she pushed those thoughts aside, convincing herself it was just nerves. After all, it had been a long time since she'd felt this way about anyone. At 9:45 p.m., Emma and Mark left the Blue Stone Room, holding hands as they walked toward the City Life Hotel. Mark had rented an apartment there for the night, and as they entered the elevator, Emma felt a thrill of excitement mixed with a hint of trepidation. The elevator doors closed behind them, sealing Emma's fate as they ascended to Mark's floor. The next morning, October 3rd, should have been a day of celebration, Emma's 24th birthday. But instead of waking up to messages from her loved ones, Emma's phone was silent. She had not responded to any of the birthday wishes that had flooded in overnight, and as the day wore on, concern began to grow. Back in England, her family tried calling her repeatedly, but both of Emma's phones went straight to voicemail. Her friends at the hostel were also worried. They hadn't seen Emma since she left for her date the night before. Meanwhile, Mark was seen on CCTV leaving the City Life Hotel alone, his demeanor calm and composed. He made his way to a nearby store, where he purchased cleaning supplies and a large suitcase. There was no trace of the charm he had displayed the night before, no sign of the man who had shared drinks and laughter with Emma. Instead, Mark was methodical, his actions calculated as he returned to his apartment. Mark's behavior grew increasingly suspicious. After returning to his apartment with the cleaning supplies, he rented a car and drove to another bar, where he met up with a second Tinder date. Less than 24 hours after being with Emma, Mark was already pursuing another woman. But this time, something was off. The woman found Mark's behavior unsettling, particularly when he began talking about the best places to hide a dead body. She quickly ended the date, feeling creeped out by his morbid comments. Undeterred, Mark returned to his apartment, where he borrowed a carpet steam cleaner from the hotel's front desk. He spent hours in his apartment, meticulously cleaning every inch of the room. By the time he was finished, it was late in the evening, and Mark was seen loading the large suitcase along with several other bags onto a luggage cart. He calmly wheeled the cart down to his rented car, loaded everything into the trunk, and drove off into the night. As October 3rd turned into October 4th, Emma's family was growing increasingly frantic. They knew something was wrong. Emma would never go this long without contacting them, especially on her birthday. Her father decided to take matters into his own hands and flew to New Zealand, determined to find his daughter. He arrived in Auckland on October 5th, only to be met with the grim reality that Emma was missing. The police launched an investigation, starting with the CCTV footage from the hostel. The last time Emma was seen alive was on October 2nd, leaving the hostel to meet Mark. From there, they traced her steps through the footage from Sky City, the Mexican Cafe, the Bluestone Room, and finally, the City Life Hotel. The last image of Emma was her entering the elevator with Mark, smiling and unaware of the danger she was in. Mark was brought in for questioning on October 6th. At first, he played the part of the concerned date, insisting that he and Emma had a nice time and that she left his apartment on her own. But his story didn't add up, and the police weren't convinced. They obtained a search warrant for his apartment, and what they found inside confirmed their worst fears. Despite Mark's attempts to clean the crime scene, the forensic team discovered bloodstains hidden beneath the carpet, invisible to the naked eye but revealed by the use of luminol. The entire apartment was a carefully constructed facade, hiding the violence that had occurred within its walls. The evidence was damning, and Mark's calm demeanor began to crack under the pressure. On October 7th, Mark was brought in for a second round of questioning. This time, his story changed. He admitted to driving out to the Waitakere Ranges with a suitcase and a shovel, but he insisted that Emma's death was an accident. His voice was cold, detached, as he described burying her body in a shallow grave, far from the city lights that had once enchanted her. The police were relentless, and Mark's confession was enough to charge him with Emma's murder. The trial that followed was a formality. There was no question of his guilt. The evidence was overwhelming, and the jury took little time to reach a verdict. Mark was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. But the story didn't end there. In November 2021, 2 more women came forward, accusing Mark of sexual assault after matching with him on Tinder. These incidents had occurred months before Emma's murder, but they had never been reported. With the new charges, Mark's sentence was extended by an additional 11 years, ensuring that he would remain behind bars for the foreseeable future. Emma's tragic fate serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind a friendly smile or a charming conversation. A young woman, full of life and dreams, was taken from this world far too soon by a man who hid his true nature behind a mask of normalcy. Her story is one of heartbreak and loss, but also a warning to us all. As you scroll through your apps tonight, remember Emma Clark. Let her story remind you to be cautious, to trust your instincts, and to be aware that sometimes the real horror isn't found in ghost stories or haunted houses. It's found in the everyday encounters that seem perfectly normal until it's too late. I was never a fan of dating apps, but after my last breakup, my friend suggested I try Tinder, saying that it would make my dating life alive and fun again. Flying around and swiping random guys left or right, one of the profiles really caught my eye. It was a single pic, very closely taken, focused on the deep blue eyes of Ethan. "Truth is not always what you see through your eyes," his bio read. Out of sheer curiosity, I swiped right. We matched, and eventually our conversation led us to meet up face to face. After some coffee at a place near my apartment, Ethan invited me for dinner at his apartment. As we ate dinner in the flickering candlelight, I couldn't help but admire Ethan's face. His sharp jawline made my heart skip a beat. His Tinder profile hadn't captured the intensity in his eyes enough. There was a kind of manic hunger in them that sent a shiver down my spine, yet there was an undeniable magnetism about him, a darkness that repelled and attracted me. Our conversation flowed surprisingly well. We bonded over underrated art and banned literature. He spoke of his love for Edgar Allan Poe, reciting verses about love and loss with a chilling intensity. As the night progressed, Ethan suggested we move to his balcony. "How about we get some fresh air? You'll love the view from here." I hesitated at first. The small, cluttered balcony felt oddly claustrophobic. But Ethan's smile, boyish and disarming, made me comfortable. The view from the balcony wasn't bad. The city lights below looked like scattered diamonds, but there was something very odd stuck in the air, making me wrinkle my nose. "Something smells meaty," I commented, noticing a covered grill tucked in the corner. Ethan gave a creepy laugh, a hollow sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Just a little lamb burger," he said, his voice too casual. "Family recipe," he whispered with a grin. He lifted the lid, revealing a sizzling patty. My stomach twisted. The lamb looked unnaturally dark, the edges grilled black. Suddenly, I noticed something more on the patty. There was a long strand of blonde hair wrapped around it. I felt like throwing up. "Whoa, that doesn't look too good. It's making me sick," I mumbled, backing away. All of a sudden, Ethan's smile disappeared. His eyes narrowed, the charming personality replaced by a cold, dangerous gleam. "I promise you'll love the taste of it. Just give it a try, Monica." The words sent a fresh wave of terror through me. I don't feel well. I need to go." "No, you don't," he growled, grabbing my hand with surprising strength. "What are you doing?" I screamed, trying to free myself. "Don't you see?" he hissed. His expression was now a mix of anger and desperation. We were meant to be together forever. The smell in the air intensified. Desperate by sheer terror, I wrestled free. I stumbled back, tripping over a metal bucket that was resting in the corner of the balcony. It clanged loudly, revealing its gruesome contents: a bleached skull and several long bones. Ethan raged at me again. "Monica, don't ruin the food!" But this time I was ready. With a rush of adrenaline, grabbing a metal spatula kept on top of the hot grill, I swung it at Ethan blindly. The thudding sound of metal on bone echoed in the night. Ethan fell to the ground, a choked gasp escaping his lips. I was staring at him, the spatula trembling in my hand. Nausea threatened to overwhelm me again, but this time it was mixed with a horrifying realization. The burger, the bones, Ethan's words, they all clicked into place. He wasn't just a psycho, he was a monster who couldn't handle rejection, and I was about to become another entry in his collection of discarded dates. Dazed and trembling, I ran to the lobby outside his apartment and called 911. The image of Ethan's twisted face and the gruesome contents of the bucket made my fingers tremble while I dialed the call. Ethan remained unconscious until the police arrived. A group of them got inside his apartment while I was escorted out by the paramedics. But even amidst the flashing lights and concerned questions, I was not able to shake the feeling of fear. God, I was on a date with a cannibal. The following days were a blur. News reports buzzed with Ethan's arrest. The police had discovered a hidden room in his apartment filled with the remains of young women. Each had matched with Ethan on dating apps, each lured under the pretense of romance. As the only alive key witness, my story is a chilling testament to the monster who hid behind a charming facade. Yet, a part of my mind remained haunted. The lingering smell and those horrific laughs in my nightmares. The echo of Ethan's words, we were meant to be together forever, served as a constant reminder of the night I danced with death on a balcony bathed in moonlight. It was 9 years ago when I matched with Olivia on Tinder. She was 36, divorced, and living in a suburban area not far from my apartment. At 28, I was just looking for some fun, to be honest, and Olivia seemed perfect. We clicked instantly, bonding over a shared love for classic rock, horror movies, and a mutual disdain for small-town gossip. There was a spark between us, an electric attraction, so to say. You like the Rolling Stones? No way, they're my favorite band. Yeah, I saw them live back in '99. That was a wild night. We decided to meet at a quiet bar she recommended. I remember the place well, dimly lit with old wooden booths and a jukebox that played nothing but '80s hits. And then she walked in. Olivia was stunning. She had this effortless charm, a confident gait, and, well, a smoking hot body. We laughed, flirted, and drank more than we probably should have. She was blunt about her intentions. I hope age isn't a damper. I mean, look at you. You can't be 8 years older than me. I'll be honest, Ethan. I like going around with younger men, and I'm not looking for anything. Just so you know, it's a one-night thing. Sounds perfect to me. We left the bar, and Olivia invited me to her place. Her bungalow was old, with a Victorian style that looked kind of unsettling under the moonlight. My drunken brain felt a twinge of unease as soon as I stepped inside. The house was beautifully maintained but had an unnerving air about it. The living room had antique furniture, dark wood paneling, and heavy drapes. But something didn't fit. The creamy, textured carpet. It clashed with the decor, standing out like a sore thumb. Nice place you got here. Daddy sells oil. Daddy shot himself when I was 3. I got the place in the divorce. My ex-husband was into real estate. Want another drink? She handed me a glass of whiskey, and we settled on the couch. Her touch was intoxicating, and soon our fingers were exploring each other's while our eyes locked. There was something about her brutal honesty, her charm, and her confidence that had me drunk, other than the Jack Daniels. You have great taste in decor. Very vintage. I'm a sucker for antiques. They have a history, a story to tell, just like us. Oh, and what's our story? 2 strangers meeting by chance and sharing an adventure. Sounds exciting. What kind of adventure do you have in mind? One that starts with good whiskey and ends with, well, we'll see. I like the sound of that. You're full of surprises, aren't you? Only the good kind. What about you? What surprises do you have up your sleeve? You'll have to stick around to find out. I think I just might. So, tell me, what is a handsome guy like you doing on Tinder? Looking for someone intriguing. I guess I found her. Flattery will get you everywhere. Good to know. And what about you? Why Tinder? Not many places for women like me to find young men like you. Lively, huh? I can do lively. I bet you can. Shall we take this adventure downstairs? I have a special room for my guests. Lead the way. But as she grabbed my arm to lead me to her bedroom, a wave of nausea hit me. I stumbled, and before I could stop myself, it came out. I vomited all over the carpet. I remember Olivia's demeanor changing in an instant. She flew into a fit of rage, rushing to grab a mop, her face twisted with anger. You idiot, you ruined my carpet. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I sewed it with my hands. The one thing in this house that doesn't remind me of my sick ex-husband, and now your bile is swimming over it. Realizing I had blown my chance, I mumbled an apology and hurried out of the house. My head was spinning, my stomach churning. I made it home and collapsed into bed, cursing my capacity for ruining what would have been a glorious night. Now, 9 years later, I saw her face plastered on the news. Olivia, now 45, was arrested. A secret torture room was uncovered in the basement of her bungalow where she kept young men and tortured them. One of her victims had managed to escape and alerted the authorities. The police found evidence of cannibalism, token parts of previous lovers she had taken, and the final horrifying reveal: a carpet made of human skin. I sat there, staring at the TV in disbelief. The creamy, textured carpet flashed in my mind, and a chill ran down my spine as I realized how lucky I was. When I matched with David on Tinder, I couldn't believe that he'd swiped right on me. He was 27, an Australian globetrotter with an infectious smile and tousled blonde hair. His tan was just perfect. It had to be because he surfed, and he wore an intriguing blue-beaded necklace in every photo. We started flirting over texts almost immediately. "So, what does a gorgeous girl like you do for fun on a gorgeous Boston evening like today besides swiping on Tinder?" "Mostly exploring the city and avoiding bad dates." "Oh, you deserve a good one. Drinks tomorrow night?" "Smooth." "Wow, you don't waste time, do you?" "Why waste it? It's the most precious thing in the world. Well, except for that smile of yours." He was good. We exchanged numbers and decided to meet at a pub downtown. The night came, and I was nervous but excited. I arrived early, found a table, and waited, and then waited some more. Rejected 2 advances from strangers for him and let a martini sit, hoping that my surfer boy would surface. But he didn't. An hour passed and still no David. It was then that it dawned on me. He had stood me up. I rushed back to my place. Even my calls weren't getting placed. Frustrated, I texted him, "Hey, where are you? I was waiting for you for over an hour. I was there at the pub, didn't see you." "See this? Men and their lies for real. Stop disappointing me further. You need proof? Here you go." He sent a photo of the pub. It was from the same night, judging by the people and the lighting. "Where were you?" "Near the jukebox." How could we have not seen each other? God knows. I was confused. Something didn't feel right to me. I'm not sure that meeting up would be a good idea. His responses caught me off guard. What harm could a coffee do? So reluctantly, I agreed. But stupid me, the same thing happened again. I sat there in the cafe feeling more and more foolish as time passed. Eventually, I had to get up and leave. I couldn't believe that the guy had made a fool of me not once, but twice. When I texted him angrily, he simply replied with another photo, this time of the cafe from that evening. "This is ridiculous. Are you messing with me? No, I swear I was there. Maybe we just keep missing each other. I tried to call you from the cafe. There was no ring. I have some troubles with my American SIM card. Need Wi-Fi to make calls." That was it. I wasn't going to be fooled twice. I blocked his number, chalking it up to a bizarre catfishing experience. Months passed, and I forgot about David. But then one night, while out at the club with friends, I saw him. The same tousled hair, the same blue-beaded necklace. He stood in the distance, almost like a shadow, but I could feel his eyes upon me. My heart raced as I approached him, but he vanished into the crowd. Back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Curiosity and a lingering sense of unease led me to unblock David's number. I called him, but again, there was no ring. Surprisingly, a few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a message. It was a photo of the nightclub from that very night. What the hell is going on? Just wanted to see you again. I owed you some answers. Anger surged through me, but before I could respond, another message came through. This one was a newspaper clipping with David's picture. The headline read, "Australian surfer, 4th victim of the Boston Barbie, matched on Tinder the night before his poisoning." My blood ran cold. I stared at the clipping, which proclaimed that David was dead. He had been dead for months, murdered by a serial killer. My hands trembled as I typed a reply. This isn't funny. How are you sending these? Thank you for liberating me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo of me taken from behind. I was sitting on my couch, staring at my phone in horror. Every hair on my body stood on end. I gathered the courage to turn around, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. Instead, on the floor, where no one had been a moment before, lay David's blue beaded necklace. She wanted to meet me alone, on the beach, no one else around. Definitely a good sign, I thought. Tinder was supposed to be a wonderland of discreet, anonymous fun that awaited me after an extremely painful divorce. Instead, it had turned into a battlefield of rejection, offering me more no's in an hour than I could tally after a year of social events and bar crawls. Then Tabby swiped right. I couldn't believe it at first. Cute, funny, employed, capable of driving herself, pretty much everything I was looking for in a Tinder match. I won't lie, I have the same needs as everyone else on the app. So, when Tabby wanted to meet me on the sand at Hollywood Beach near Ventura, alone, far from prying eyes, it felt like the perfect match. Of course, I thought it was too good to be true. I was mostly convinced that she wouldn't show. Following her cryptic instructions, I took a narrow path between two houses leading straight to the water. My phone's flashlight bobbed in front of me, but darkness quickly surrounded me. There's about 200 yards of sand between the houses and the water. I soon felt like I was lost in the middle of a desert. No house lights were on nearby. I was entirely alone. I was just about ready to turn around, and then I saw her. She was lying face up in the sand. "Tabby," I murmured. She didn't say anything, but I knew it had to be her. No one else was within screaming distance. I aimed my flashlight at her and walked straight forward to avoid surprising or scaring her. Strangely, she remained lying down until I was standing right beside her. Hi," I greeted, glancing down with a hesitant smile. She looked as good as her picture, better even, which shocked me. She wore a red dress, splayed out on the sand like she'd been ready for a night out. Tabby was gazing up at the stars with an unblinking stare. Slowly, she reached for me and beckoned with a wag of her finger. I sat in the cold sand next to her, setting my phone down to provide just enough light so we weren't completely blind. I hesitated for a moment before taking her hand in mine. She squeezed my fingers playfully, then ran her nails up my forearm, leaving a trail of goosebumps in her wake. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It had been so long since I'd felt truly connected to someone. I didn't know why she wanted silent touching, but I decided not to question her motives. I reached forward to stroke her cheek in the dim light. But her cheek was lukewarm. Tabby's head turned away from me as I grazed it, continuing to rotate unnaturally until it broke contact with my fingers. Then, with a sickening sound, like pulling a shoe from a puddle of syrup, her head twisted off her neck and rolled onto the sand. There was just enough light to see the squishy viscera of her ravaged stump. I froze. For a moment, all I could sense was the distant crashing of waves, the cold sand beneath me, and Tabby's severed head. Movie deaths are always profound and dramatic. I didn't know how to process the casual, everyday way a human body could break, like a cracking egg. Then I noticed her hand gripping my arm. I stared in horror as her fingers continued to creep upward despite her lack of a head. Her other arm reached forward to join it. Tabby's entire body began squirming toward me. The sand beneath her neck shifted, and everything made horrifying sense. Somebody was wearing Tabby's clothes. They'd cut off her head, laid down on the beach and buried their own head in the sand, positioning her severed head above their own. In daylight, I would have recognized it immediately, but the darkness had hidden just enough. They wrapped both hands around my elbow and sat up. A cascade of sand raining down from their obscured face, I saw dark eyes staring back at me before instinct took over. I grabbed a fistful of sand with my free hand and threw it at their face. With an unnatural hiss, the grip on my elbow loosened just slightly, and that was enough. I yanked my arm free, scrambled to my feet, and raced into the darkness. Panic blurred into mindless flight. I could have been running for 19 hours or 13 seconds. I truly don't know. My phone was still on the beach. Its bright flashlight making it impossible to hide, so I didn't stop to retrieve it. Eventually, I found myself on a dark highway with no street lamps and no idea where to go. I felt ready to scream. Had the world disappeared? Where were all the motorists? Almost as if in answer, twin lights appeared far down the road. Relief surged through me as I sprinted toward them, my shoes slapping against the pavement. The car screeched to a halt just before hitting me. I must have terrified the driver, but I didn't care. I rushed to the passenger side window. It cracked open an inch. "Can I help you?" a timid voice asked. "Yes," I gasped, almost laughing with relief. "I was attacked on the beach and lost my phone. Could you call the police and help me find my car?" The kindness of strangers really is the best thing. I reflected on that as we drove down the highway, my tension finally easing. "Shit, I must look terrible," I muttered, glancing into the rearview mirror. Dark eyes stared back at me from the back seat. Bloodshot eyes, as though someone had just thrown sand in them. I spun around, convinced it was all in my head, but the seat wasn't empty. Someone wearing Tabby's red dress was lying there. I jumped out of the moving car just as a familiar hand reached for me. Yes, hitting the pavement at 30 miles an hour hurt worse than anything I'd ever felt. But it didn't kill me, and that was all I needed to keep going. I hobbled back to my car and tore out of there as fast as I could, checking the back seat more than the road. My horror grew as I realized I'd been texting this psychopath the entire time. How much did they know about me? I don't know if I'm safe, but I had to let you know.